my broadcast. That hasn't happened for quite a while. My apologies for that. I don't know what's happening there. Yep, it may be that it does not like that I'm running the stream. I'm not really sure what the issue is there. But welcome back. Jeez, that's very frustrating. Not sure what was happening there. If anyone makes it back to the stream, oh gosh, really a shame. Lost a lot of folks there. Not so sure what the problem was. Yep, nobody's back yet. So again, Houston, we have a problem. And apparently it may be the red ants. Don't know what happened there. Oh my goodness, quite a frustrating situation. Oh my goodness. Is anybody back with me? Right. All right. There you go. A few folks back. Yanni, thanks for getting back. Sorry, folks. I don't know what that was. That was really strange. I really don't understand what was going on there. But then I haven't understood when that was happening to begin with for quite some time here. Relax. Yeah. Houston, we have a problem. And the problem is a processor problem, I would guess, or red ants. It's interesting because I still see up on the screen the NASA feed, which I took off. So I don't know how that's running there. Anyway, welcome back, folks. Yeah, thanks for coming back. Appreciate your patience. Hopefully that won't happen to us again. That actually hasn't happened in over a week. I started to get a little cocky there. I rebooted my router and re-fired up my laptop and didn't expect that to happen. So anyway, for those who've made it back to the stream, I'll get back to introducing you to astronaut Doug Hurley in just a moment. He's 53 years old. But for those curious, I'm wearing a USA road jersey from the 2011 Rugby World Cup. This is actually the jersey that they wore in New Zealand at the World Cup. We didn't win. Well, we won one game in 2011. They beat the Russians. So there you go. Today we're beating the Russians by going into space. And in 2011 at the World Cup in New Zealand, we beat them with the game we actually played against them in the World Cup. So there you have it. Let's see. So back to introducing the astronauts. So as I was mentioning, the second astronaut on this launch is astronaut Doug Hurley, who's 53 years old. And he was quoted as saying that it's been such a long road, and it's kind of been a personal journey to transition from the space shuttle era to this next era of spaceflight. And in fact, it is a new era in spaceflight, ladies and gentlemen. Quite a different era here now with commercial aviation, commercial aerospace teaming up with NASA in a combined effort here. So what we're seeing is the SpaceX Dragon Crew capsule along with the Falcon 9 rocket system launching NASA astronauts into space to travel to the International Space Station for the first manned space flight in the U.S. since 2011, nearly a decade later. Many people at NASA and those who follow the space community were a bit surprised. Many expected the U.S. to return to manned space flight within 3 to 5 years. And here we are nearly a decade later since the U.S. has been involved in manned space flight. So anyway, 10 years later. So that's the two astronauts going up, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. For those unfamiliar with it, with NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration was created in 1958, and it has been around ever since then, responsibility for civilian aspects of the U.S. government's efforts to go into space and space exploration. They also do a lot of things tied to weather with satellites to track, because, of course, the Earth is a celestial body, and so they pay attention to what's happening with Earth. And so we also have NASA responsible for satellites tracking weather patterns and geological developments here on Earth itself. And so I'm going to actually take that off for now, and we'll get back to that a little bit because it's a little distracting. Okay, so that's over there now. Variable vision, 53. I'm sure the fitness requirements of the mission were quite grueling. Much respect. Yeah, I'm 55, and I grew tired of taking the Army physical fitness test, not because I couldn't, but because it just gets old after doing it for 36 years. So I empathize and show a lot of respect for him. Yeah, glad I'm back, Kyle. I'm not sure why we dropped off. Hopefully it won't happen again. Apparently something happened. It wasn't quite satisfactory, which is odd. I've had a 4-hour live stream in the past week. I've had multiple hour-and-a-half ones, hour-long streams, and that's the first time it's happened in a while. Took all the normal steps that I take to prevent it from happening, but I think the bottom line is I'm just going to have to use different kit, set up with different rigs so that doesn't happen in the future. But the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, established in 1958, is responsible for civilian aspects of space for the U.S. government. Is it your experience you can use a jerry can without spilling any fuel? Man, I cannot seem to get it right. Any advice, Chris? Well, Vihan, you've got to have the right spout with a good locking rubber seal. And if you get one of those, you can do it. Yeah, I've had to use a lot of jerry cans in my time in the military, so that's actually a good question for me, Vihan. And also on the farm. As a farmer, I use jerry cans all the time. The ones in the Army weren't always good. So if you found a good one with a good rubber seal at the base of it that you could put down and clamp, that was the key. But the problem is that those seals just don't last very long. And also a lot of them are poorly made. So you got to get the right one. Welcome back, folks. Glad to see you here. Yeah, jerry can. It was a nickname from the German military in the Second World War. It called the Germans the Jerrys. So it kind of stuck around. It came from that, I believe. I think that's the history of it. HBM Air is here. Hey, HBM Air, did you send me a banner? If you did, I don't recall. Anyway, just asking very quickly. So we lost half our audience. Hopefully people feel figured out and come back. But for those back, welcome once again. I was mentioning who the U.S. astronauts are. Those two astronauts are Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, who are 49 and 53 years of age. And both of them have previous experience in space, with Bob Behnken having 708 hours in space. His last flight was the STS-130. That was a space shuttle flight in February 2010. For Doug Hurley, he has 680 hours, and that was an STS-135 in July of 2011. So I think that was actually the last flight. I think it was on the last flight that went up. So there you have it. Relike the video. Yeah, please relike it. Thanks. Dietrich Bucher, guten Abend. Ja, na, wie geht's? Hoffentlich gut. Es ist ja ziemlich gut hier mitten in Pennsylvania und wir sind sehr froh, dass wir sind wieder in der Luft. We're very happy that once again we have manned spaceflight coming up here in less than 1 hour, ladies and gentlemen, just a little over a half hour from now. NASA/SpaceX Demo 2 flight to the International Space Station with astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley will take place in less than 1 hour, weather permitting. Now, we had bad weather here in central Pennsylvania with overcast skies and clouds and light thunderstorms, and it has cleared up. I can only hope that that is the case over Cape Canaveral and that this flight will take place. President Donald Trump is in Cape Canaveral for the launch. A lot of people are very excited about this. NASA now has over 1 million people watching their stream. It's quite exciting. Normally it would be tens of thousands gathered at Cape Canaveral, but because of the social distancing going on, we don't see quite as many people for the crowds there. Hendo, welcome aboard. Good to see you. Love the smell of petrol. Cheaper than cigarettes. Petrol is cheaper than cigarettes because cigarettes are illegal in South Africa. It looks like a lot of folks here are listening tonight are from South Africa. Thanks for tuning in. What else we got here to say? Tight fitting spout with good gasket. Yeah, the gasket's what you need. That is the key. But the Army always used cheap gaskets, or they used cork gaskets. Cork gaskets do not work very well. You need the rubber ones for the good seal. Anyway, so back to this. Let me show you guys something that might interest you. Let me get the caricature off there. I know that's become kind of a signature thing for me. But let me show you this and tell me what you guys think of this. This is Major General Chuck Bolden, NASA astronaut, space shuttle astronaut, and former administrator of NASA. Now, he came to Ethiopia when I worked at the U.S. mission to the African Union along with his wife for a visit because Ethiopia was getting involved in space travel and space exploration. And so he came there to discuss Ethiopia teaming up with the United States for space exploration. So Major General Chuck Bolden, I guess the one thing that surprised me is he's pretty short, standing next to me there. You can see the American flag and the Ethiopian flag. Whoever took that and lined them up didn't do a very good job of figuring out a good spot because that's not the best background. But that's Major General Bolden, who at the time was in NASA administration. He served from 2009 until 2017 under the Obama administration, an era in which the NASA changed much of its focus to unmanned space flight and space exploration for things like, it already launched, but things like the New Horizons mission and putting telescopes up to look for other Earth-like spheres out in space. So General Bolden came there. He was quite an interesting fellow, but very short. I was very surprised by that. Variable Vision says he also speaks German, but you're still learning. Yes, I do have German friends from all over the world. I also have some German colleagues from the military. That's a tremendous humble brag. Yeah, it is a kind of a humble brag, isn't it? No, it's nothing to do with me. It's just kind of cool. He didn't come to see me. Now, if he came to Ethiopia to see me, that would be a humble brag. But no, it's kind of cool. General Bolden was a very, very polite, professional, wonderful person to talk to. And he spoke to the American staff and the Ethiopian staff at the embassy there, and also the staff who work for our diplomatic mission. There's two diplomatic missions at the embassy in Ethiopia. One is the American mission to Ethiopia, and the second is the U.S. mission to the African Union. We use the same facility, the same building, which can be a little confusing at times. But the USAU mission is much smaller than the American mission to Ethiopia. But General Bolden, as the administrator for NASA, came and spoke to the Ethiopians and also spoke to Americans and Ethiopian staff at the embassy. He's quite a professional gentleman, and it was a wonderful experience. So I guess it's a little bit of a humble brag, but this is what I got out of it. This is kind of cool. So let me find this. This is, he did give me that. That's from his days as an astronaut. Check it out. Check out that spacesuit compared to what they're flying in today. You look at that orange spacesuit, and you look at these guys from SpaceX suits that the NASA astronauts are wearing today's flight, and you're wondering, wow, those were the dark days, huh? Look at that thing. So that's Major General Chuck Bolden. That was he autographed that. He did those for everybody there that wanted one, but he gave a personal touch there for mine. Of course, he was a Marine, so it says Semper Fi. He can be forgiven for that. It's not his fault that he didn't join the Army. But it worked out for him. He got to be a pilot and then eventually a shuttle pilot as well. So pretty cool experience. One of their own became the administrator under the Obama administration for NASA. So that's Major General Chuck Bolden. I just thought I'd show it to you guys real quick. South Africans understand more Plattdeutsch. Yeah, it's probably similar to, because it's easier, the conjugation, kind of like Afrikaans. Hendo says, understood all that German. Well, that's excellent. Shouldn't astronauts be short like jockeys and horses? Now, Hank, that's actually a good question. Maybe they should be short. And I think that, honestly, maybe that's what's going on here. Because the dude is really short. You saw that in the photograph. I had no idea he was that short. I wasn't expecting that. I'm 6'2", so he's 5-something. You can see it right there. Conrad Ventna says, the Trump suit. Are you talking about the Trump suit, the one that they're wearing today with the cool little black booties that come up over the pants legs? Yeah, that's pretty cool stuff. So let me see. I've got, I think I put something else here. So this is an effort by SpaceX, who's designed the Falcon 9 rocket and the Crew Dragon capsule, which the shuttle crew, or not shuttle, shuttle, sorry, force of habit, which the NASA crew will be going into space aboard. This is them inside training for it, and that's from the SpaceX website. As I said, SpaceX is a privately held corporation founded by Elon Musk, who controls 78% of the stock, even though he doesn't own that much of it. And so he's made sure that he's remained in position to direct where the company goes. But 8,000 employees with SpaceX, kind of cool. Yeah, Brew, you were on the wrong stream because the Red Ants are interfering with space launch. They don't want to see America celebrate this fantastic historic moment, this collaboration between the private sector and government, and the return of manned spaceflight to the United States from Cape Canaveral. So, yeah. Well, their suits do look so Tesla. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, you missed it earlier, probably a few hours ago, when they drove out to the Pad 39 Alpha, where the Apollo 11 mission was launched from, the historic location. I've actually been there in Cape Canaveral and visited that a few years back, about a decade ago, before the last shuttle launch. I was there visiting Cape Canaveral. But they drove out to the pad in Teslas, so kind of do it in class. But you can't be surprised by that. Elon Musk, that's sort of his thing. The guy launched the Tesla into space, heading it towards Mars, so kind of cool. Well, Variable Vision says, much respect for your astronauts, modern-day pioneers. Hey, listen, ladies and gentlemen, much respect to Elon Musk. Aside from his zolling and his weed toking on a radio program, which I took a little exception to, is quite an impressive person in his vision, his drive, his desire to get humans into space and to Mars is really a big reason why the U.S. is even capable of doing this. Boeing also has a program and competed with SpaceX for contracts with NASA, but they ran into some trouble and difficulties with their program. SpaceX has done it for less, and they've been more successful. In fact, I took a look here and just ran through some of the different things that... what's the height requirement? Well, it depends on the spacecraft. I honestly don't know there, Ranger Buddy, what the height requirement is. But let me just run through just a few of the first. Now, some of these will sound esoteric, but these are some of the things that SpaceX has done first. This is pretty amazing for this private company. Major achievements of SpaceX are the reuse orbital class launch vehicles, cost reduction in space launch industry, which is the most important. Elon Musk's goal was to reduce the cost of launch by a factor of 10, and he's been working on that. Most notable of these being the continued landings and relaunches of the first stage of the Falcon 9, which is the rocket taking them into space, hopefully, within the hour. As of March, I say hopefully because weather, folks, we're worried about weather. As of March 2020, SpaceX has used a single first stage booster at the most 5 times. So they got 5 uses out of it instead of a single use, which is good. Landmark achievements of the SpaceX in chronological order include the first privately funded liquid-fueled rocket to reach orbit. That was the Falcon 1, the 4th flight on the 28th of September 2008. Here we are just 12 years after they got their first successful rocket in space, and they're going to launch humans into space with NASA. First privately developed liquid-fueled rocket to put a commercial satellite into orbit. That was on the Falcon 1 Flight 5 on 14 July 2009. So it was the next flight. First private company to successfully launch, orbit, and recover a spacecraft. That was the SpaceX Dragon in 2010. First private company to send a spacecraft to the International Space Station. That was the Dragon Charlie 2 in 2012. the first landing of an orbital rocket first stage on land. It just goes on and on. So the deal is that the rockets are supposed to return to Earth and land successfully on a SpaceX platform so that they can be reused after this flight. We shall see. This is quite exciting. SpaceX is, again, a private venture founded by Elon Musk. And only in America, ladies and gentlemen, only in America do you see this sort of ingenuity. And even if we have to steal from South Africa to do it, we'll do that. As you can see, Elon Musk came to America. Anyway, okay. And then there's HBM Air. How do you steal Tesla? How do you steal a Tesla in South Africa? You come with your own batteries. That's funny. Well, we do steal a South African talent. It's not just spaceflight where we've stolen South Africans. We have a number of South African nurses who come to America, immigrated here, because in the U.S., nurses tend to have more responsibility than you get in South Africa, and they're paid far better, and it's a lot less dangerous than most of South Africa for nurses to work. So yeah, we steal your people's flight and also your nurses. So thank you so much for that, South Africa. Well, that and your wine. We do appreciate that as well. And the Springboks. So anyway, yeah, T-minus 31. Kyle, thanks for pointing that out. We're close. Yep, we are very close. Let's see. Vilifamak says, we wish we had a better country so we could also get Tesla cars. Load shedding will not help South Africa Tesla. yeah, that's a bit of a problem, ladies and gentlemen. That is a bit of a problem. Imagine if Elon Musk could run Eskom. Well, if Elon Musk could run Eskom, then it would be profitable within 36 months, no doubt in my mind. But honestly, you don't even need Elon Musk. You just need somebody that can walk and chew gum that's not a cadre that doesn't owe their existence to the African National Congress, and then you'll be able to solve Eskom pretty quickly. Now, of course, the problem with anybody who takes over Eskom is the existing debt, and that might have to be something the South African government picks up when it spins off Eskom. But they're not going to let Eskom go. Not going to let it go at all. Yeah, pipe dream, I think that's right. Musk got big electricity batteries in Australia helping with their electricity shortages. Yeah, he's also been working on these remote power sites for places, remote areas, using the batteries from Tesla. But Tesla has its own challenges. Quite impressive company nonetheless, but it has its own challenges, and its cars are quite pricey, ladies and gentlemen. Only the extremely wealthy can afford a Tesla car, without a doubt. Yeah, anyway, for those just tuning in, welcome to the stream. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania, here on quite, hopefully, a historic day for the United States. Depending on the weather, we're now less than 30 minutes away from the historic launch of a NASA team of astronauts on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and Crew Dragon capsule on the first manned space launch from U.S. soil since 2011. This mission the Demo 2 mission going to the International Space Station. It'll take 19 hours for the astronauts, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, to reach the International Space Station once they launch. Less than 30 minutes away, folks. T-minus 20, 22, and 3, 25. T-minus 25 minutes and counting as we build towards this launch. Kind of exciting here. I haven't seen this much excitement about the U.S. space program, with the exception of the Pluto mission with New Horizons. Beyond that, I haven't seen this much excitement about the space program since the 1980s. A lot of Americans very excited. It's not simply the Wuhan coronavirus COVID-19 lockdown that's got people tuning into this and paying attention. It's the fact that we're going back to space. Despite the claims by our former president, Barack Obama, that we weren't going to be able to go into space. It didn't make much sense to do manned spaceflight. Here we are again trying to do manned spaceflight. And for the first time in nearly a decade, the United States is not dependent on Russia and a launch pad in Kazakhstan. Once again, we're launching humans into space from Cape Canaveral, historic location of the Mercury, the Apollo space programs, and the Space Shuttle program. Quite exciting for those who've ever been to Florida. Make sure if you go to Florida, you get a chance to go to Cape Canaveral and visit the NASA site. It's quite impressive. A lot of things to see and do there. And if you happen to be there during a launch, that'd be all the more amazing. It is quite impressive. Variable Vision says, would love to get your global perspective on increasing Chinese aggression. I understand they're pushing boundaries in their India borders at the Himalayas. They are. In fact, thank you, Hendo, for saying push the like button. I really appreciate it, folks. Got 42 folks back in, so I think we got most of the viewers back who were with us before we rudely got cut off. My apologies for that, folks. That happens from time to time. It hasn't happened over a week, so I must not be paying somebody off. I didn't pay my bribe to somebody because we got cut off. People get excited because it's mankind or explorers by nature, push our limits, the right stuff. You're absolutely right, Hendo. It is not the nature of mankind to sit back passively and wait for things to happen. We're curious. We're thinking creatures, and we're natural-born explorers. We push the limits. I mean, why go to the North Pole? There's not even land there. It's just ice cap. Well, unless you have climate change. I guess it's not so much ice all the time. But why even go to the North Pole? Just to say you were there? How do you know you're there? Unless you have the right measurements. Maybe GPS will tell you these days. But back in the day, you can't even rely on your compass because your compass points to this big deposit of iron in northern Canada, and that's magnetic north, which is not geographic north. So why go to the North Pole? South Pole, yeah, there's actually a piece of land there. I get that. Why go to the moon? Because we can. Well, President John F. Kennedy set a vision for the United States, a very forward-looking vision back in the early 1960s, and he said we choose to go to the moon, and we did. And we went to the moon. We landed in the late 1960s, 1969, and finally got the Apollo space program to get the first astronauts to land on the surface of the moon. And after the Apollo program, we have yet to return to the moon. Yet, we are about to embark on that again. This is the first step in returning to the moon. Within 3 to 5 years, it's very possible, certainly before the end of the decade, the United States will put a man or woman back on the surface of the moon and potentially start building a lunar base, hopefully to beat the Chinese, so that we can ask them for customs duties when they arrive on the moon. And also, we will be headed to Mars. The technological challenges are something that, as humans, we can overcome, and hopefully that will happen sometime in the next decade. We're looking to see. Let's see. Have you ever seen Interstellar? Exactly the sentiment reflected throughout the movie. Absolutely, I've seen Interstellar. It's fantastic. Yanni, you were at the Housing Museum a few years ago. Super awesome to see the space shuttle. Cool. Oh, that's awesome. That's pretty cool. Yeah, we all the space shuttles are retired, and a few of them have been put in museums. The one in Virginia, it's not in D.C. The Smithsonian has a museum over by Dulles Airport, and I believe one of the shuttles is there. And there's a couple in other locations. So the shuttle was quite an amazing thing. But gosh, if you pay close attention, you study what happened with the shuttle program, we are really lucky we didn't lose more shuttles, and just how fragile a spacecraft that really was, particularly with the heating tiles and seals and things like that. Quite amazing that we managed to get so many people into space and back safely when you think about it. My grandfather, Owen Truman Wyatt, was actually the lead engineer on the tail assembly of the Saturn V rocket. I didn't know him very well. I only saw my grandfather once or twice in my lifetime, but he lived near Redstone Arsenal in Alabama, and he was the lead engineer for the tail assembly for the Saturn V rocket. For those of you familiar with the Saturn V rocket, it was the backbone of the space program and took most of the flights up into space, the Saturn V rocket. The most powerful rocket built for the longest time in human history, and quite an amazing quite an achievement. But he was one of many people who worked on the program, but he worked on the Saturn V rocket. Quite impressive. Very interesting stuff. He was also a member of the OX-5 Society. For those of you familiar with the OX-5, was the first large-scale commercially available engine for aircraft back in the early part of the 20th century. And he actually flew with that engine and was a mechanic on that engine for a couple different airlines. And so in the early days of commercial aviation, he worked for the Ludington line, which was founded by Howard Hughes. I have a photograph of my grandfather with Howard Hughes back in the early 1930s, I think it was. And he was the personal mechanic when he was in the Army. He was a personal mechanic for Jimmy Doolittle. And when my grandfather was looking for a job, he got a letter of recommendation from Jimmy Doolittle. It's dated 1940, when Jimmy Doolittle was an executive with Shell Corporation, and he sent it and endorsed my grandfather, gave a recommendation for him to be hired. Yeah, so not saying my grandfather's a great, wonderful person, I'm just saying that he did some interesting things in his life, not the least of which was he was an early aviation pioneer. And he was also involved in the space program, so kind of cool. So that's my only known tie to the space program, and that's a pretty tenuous and thin thread at that. But we're now down to about 20 minutes left before the launch is supposed to take place, folks. So we'll see what's happening as we get closer to it. Let me see. Okay, I'm missing a few things here. So Hendo says, Deep State is hiding a lot of high tech from the masses, supposedly more advanced tech than we can use to travel further in the galaxy. That's interesting. Conrad says, conspiracy theorists who believe we never went to the moon also believe the astronauts saw aliens on the moon. Well, that's kind of a contradiction, isn't it, Conrad? I think that's the point. Yanni says, Chris, one of my best friends lives in Baltimore, so I always pass through Washington on my way to my final destination, U.S., when I travel. Well, Yanni, when this nonsense is over, if I'm not getting back to South Africa and you get over this way, we got to touch base and have a beer. I promise not to buy you American beer. We'll get you a good beer, actually a quality beer from a microbrewery or something like that. But I'm just 2 hours away from DC where I'm at. Variable Vision says, why do you think it took so many decades before the private sector put humans in space? Red tape, lack of interest. The extreme cost of it, I think, is the bottom line there, Variable Vision. Back when the space program was launched, between what the Russians were doing, the Soviet Union with Sputnik, and what we were doing with the Mercury program, and then, hey, welcome to all the folks tuning in. This is Chris on a live stream just in advance of the NASA SpaceX launch of the Falcon 9 rocket with the Crew Dragon shuttle. 2 astronauts from NASA, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, going into the first manned space flight from Cape Canaveral from U.S. soil since 2011. Thank you for tuning in for those just joining. Back to the question. The question isn't red tape. The question was liability. That is some of the red tape. But the real question was cost. The sheer cost in actual dollars was astronomical back when the Russians put Sputnik up and we started flying the Mercury program. No private corporation could bear that cost. But because of technological advances, over time, particularly since the advent of the internet generation in the early 1990s, the cost of technology continues to come down. What it costs to do things, the advances in science, the advances in rocket propulsion, the advances in design, all of these things have greatly reduced the costs. And even so, the cost, one of the primary motivations for Elon Musk was to reduce the cost of launching a craft into space by a factor of 10. And he has done a pretty good job of lowering that cost tremendously. That's why private corporations did get into it, because it couldn't make a profit. Governments don't exist to make a profit, so governments can take on big ventures like going into space and spend billions and billions of our dollars without our approval. But a private company will collapse. It can't make money. Now, SpaceX, I don't know if they're profitable or not. I haven't seen their sheet because it's a private corporation with 8,000 employees. But they do have large contracts worth a few $1 billion, at least with NASA. So they have a revenue stream, and NASA's giving that. That sort of ecosystem was not available back in the 1950s, 1960s, and even the 1970s. That only became available after the advent of the World Wide Web, and the massive advances have taken place in technology since then across the board in all spheres of life. I mean, look at your phone. You pull your mobile out, you got WhatsApp, you got Facebook, you got Instagram, you got all these different things connecting with people instantly around the world. GPS has dramatically increased. The number of satellites we have are up. It's more reliable. It's available to perfection almost with location for civilian uses, whereas it used to be greatly restricted to wide spots. You couldn't get a narrow pinpoint position because it was protected only for the military for that. So that's the real reason why you didn't see private corporations in the space business, because it was just astronomically high, and you have to have a profit and you have to have a customer. Well, when the government decided to do the program themselves, they were the only viable customer. It's not like Coca-Cola is looking for a launch to get to the moon, or Ford needs a launch vehicle or a rocket to do anything. So there was no need and no market for it. But now, the government having pulled back from it, technology costs greatly reduced, and ingenuity and ideas from the private industry, it makes it possible and feasible. So both Boeing and SpaceX are in this business of trying to get government contracts and also eventually commercial contracts. They've done commercial things for communications companies launching satellites, for businesses launching satellites. But for exploration and manned spaceflight, that's a little bit different story. It's 4:20 now, ladies and gentlemen. That means we are about 14 minutes away, T-minus 14, from when the launch is supposed to be happening. And we'll see if it actually happens. As we get close to launch, I will bring up the stream, and then I will silence my mic so that we can all listen to what's happening. And we'll see how it goes. Oh, they canceled. Kyle says they canceled the launch. Scrub for today. There it is. All right, well, then I don't have to bring up the stream. Let me just go ahead and delete that, ladies and gentlemen. Right. Okay, so folks, don't be disappointed. We had yesterday with the weather a 16% chance that this was going to happen. So honestly, this is not that great a surprise. Let me move General Bolden off there. There we go. Yeah, this is not that great a surprise that this is canceled. We were really hoping for the best. I mean, if they were going to be able to all make it possible, you know they would have, because Donald Trump is in Florida for the event. So they would have done it just to tease people. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of disappointing. Well, thank you all for jumping in there. Yeah, it's been canceled. Well, the next launch window is on the 30th, 3 days from now. We'll see if that happens. I don't know if I'll do a stream. I might pop on just beforehand if the weather's good. But space private sector will usher more advanced technology competition. Yes, Hendo, competition is absolutely valuable. Kyle, thank you for that. And HBM Air, Bosch, all you guys for pointing out that they can't. Weathercock, yeah. No, safety comes first, ladies and gentlemen. And look, we've seen disasters from at least 2 shuttle flights. One on launch, the Challenger in '86, and then the other one which blew up on reentry coming in during the Bush administration. So, safety is the highest priority. We've lost astronauts on the ground for capsule fires in the past. oxygen tanks and things like that. So absolutely, safety is the first priority. Can you imagine if they pushed on just for the sake of pushing on in spite of weather and something happened? This would be a tragedy. It would set the program back decades. So our disappointment now is something we can all live with. I hope that you guys have found this interesting, at least tuning in this little bit of time. And I'll tell you what, since the space flight launch is now scrubbed for the moment, and we've got a crowd on here, we'll go ahead and shift gears a little bit. Unless you have more questions about this flight, the shuttle program, the SpaceX effort here, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about events going on around the world. I don't know if people tuned in, but I did 2 videos yesterday, one of which is doing quite well, actually, for my channel. That was, and I asked the question, are you Peter Afrikaans? It's doing quite well in South Africa, where I asked the question. This is related to the video that's gotten a lot of attention because the Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association from Benenging, south of Johannesburg, filed charges against an unknown white male for insulting the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. And so he insulted her with a rather crude word, and so they decided that it was time for them to step up and stamp out this distinction between criticism and racism, and that's really sad. But actually, I think they can make that distinction. They simply mean to frighten black South Africans into thinking that all white people in South Africa are the boogeyman. And it's not going to work. Not all South Africans are that stupid. Perhaps some are, but not all are. Anyway, so I did a video called, Are You Peter Afrikaans? Anyway, so I don't know if that'll start trending on hashtag Are You Peter Afrikaans or I Am Peter Afrikaans. Nonetheless, I did that video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Kasper Labachagna says, you might have read my comment on... I think I read that, Casper, this morning. It was really early. I did the video. For me, it's 1:15 in the morning, so 7:15 in South Africa. And I did see some comments when I woke up, but my eyes were kind of fuzzy. It takes a minute for them to adjust, and I may have read that. Hendo, you promoted my channel on Facebook. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thanks for everybody tuning in. For those just coming in, because a few people stepped away or their mobiles got disconnected, and I see they've come back now. We've got quite a good-sized audience. Thank you for tuning in. My apologies, but I don't control the weather at Cape Canaveral, and apparently today's launch has been scrubbed. The next window will be on May 30th, 3 days from today, and hopefully the launch will take place then. As a few of the folks in the chat have said, safety first. That's our first priority. That's our first concern. And we need to make sure that we don't take a risk with the weather. So it makes all the sense in the world that they canceled it. I'm glad they did, actually. But anyway, had they actually done it, there's actually a demo on the SpaceX site, which I wanted to run, but I'm having a little trouble getting it to work, so I'm going to hold off on that. But anyway, thanks for tuning in, folks. Looks like a lot of people just tuned in to see the launch because this was when it was supposed to happen in a few minutes, and they dropped off because there is no launch. That's okay. You don't have to tune in to see me. But let's see. HBM Air says, I think we are all Peter Afrikaans, we're just keeping quiet. Yeah, that's probably wise. It might file cases against millions of people. But glorified mental made Zuma cigarettes merchant. That's good. Thank you for your stream. Well, Kyle, you're welcome. Yanni says, what's your video this morning? Awesome. What's or watched? I think you meant to say, yeah, we are all Peter Afrikaans. There's the hashtag. That's the one I want. Oh, he took it away. I think you meant to say you watched it. Yeah, well, thanks for watching it. I had another stream in which I talked about Russian aircraft arriving in Libya as part of the ongoing conflict in Libya between the UN-recognized government that's based in Tripoli and then the Libyan National Army backed or under the control of Khalifa Haftar, who's from eastern part of Libya. He's a rebel movement, and he's got his own army. And they marched on Tripoli and nearly captured Tripoli about 13 months ago, only to be stopped at the gates of the city and have been held up there for 13 months. Just recently, the government backed by the UN launched an offensive, and it was backed by the Turkish military, who used drones to have considerable positive effect in pushing back Haftar's forces who've been drawing back. Included amongst his forces are foreign mercenaries, reportedly 1,500 to 1,600 of them. 1,200 of them are Russian mercenaries who work for the Wagner Group or the Wagner Group, a shadowy mercenary private military contractor that is involved in the conflict. This past week, 14 MiG-29 and Su-24 advanced fighter aircraft arrived. These aircraft are capable of close air support, and they've certainly marked an escalation in what's taking place in Libya. And that was my other video. So I did the Are You Peter Afrikaans? And I did the video on the Russian aircraft coming into Libya. Now, I realize that a lot of my audience these days is South African, and I'm very grateful for the South Africans tuning in, and hopefully I give you it's not really an alternative view, because I suspect many of the things I say Most of my audience in South Africa find agreement with it. Not everything, but most things. So not really an alternative view, but certainly an external view. Since I'm an American living not in Africa at the moment, but have a great deal of African experience, I lived there a fair portion of my life across the continent and also in Southern Africa, you get an external view. And hopefully spread the word about what's happening in South Africa. The oppression of the South African people is taking place by the African National Congress today, using the excuse of the Wuhan coronavirus and the hysterical reaction to it, banning liberties and stealing freedoms from South Africans and driving millions into abject poverty. Very disturbing stuff. So there you go. Smoky. Online traffic. It's the new Me Too movement. Oh, that's a good one, RB. Maybe it is. Yeah, you missed all the space talk. I'm sorry about that, Melon Husk. We were talking about it from the outset. That was the idea. The plan was for me to go silent the last few minutes before and just put the launch on. But for those, most of you are aware now, the launch has been scrubbed for today owing to poor weather in Cape Canaveral, which is unfortunate because President Trump is in Cape Canaveral. So I don't know if he'll make use of the time and do something in Florida, maybe see the governor, touch base about the lockdown that's taking place in Florida, or he'll come back to D.C. I don't know. But President Trump had arrived down there. They carried that on TV. And what about the astronauts? They've been sitting in the capsule for about 3 hours. They're finally going to be able to debark from that capsule. Got to be stiff. Can you imagine that, sitting there like this for 3 hours? At some point, that gets quite old. And for those who are regular viewers of my channel, you'll notice that behind me, I've got something a little different today. The Africa map is covered up with the USA Sevens rugby blanket from Las Vegas. There you go. The Las Vegas Sevens. This was the 10th anniversary that they had last year, and it's the last year they held the Sevens in Las Vegas, much to the chagrin of me and many rugby Sevens fans who are not happy about it moving to Los Angeles. But anyway, so I bought this as kind of a keepsake memento. It was the only thing I had handy where I could put up a few stars, and USA and stars, and the blue background, the dark blue, kind of make you think of space. Wearing a 2011 road jersey from the USA Eagles rugby. I actually saw them in New Zealand playing against Italy. It was they lost, but nonetheless, it was an interesting game. That was in Nelson on the South Island, the very northern tip of the South Island. Interesting experience. Quite a good job the Kiwis did putting on the Rugby World Cup. At this rate, this channel become infamous. What am I going to become infamous for, man? What did I do? Do yourself a favor and listen to Lynn Petzer's new interview, Why South Africa Will Fall. I was listening to that with Scott Tungay there for a little bit. I didn't listen too long. It seemed like Scott was talking a lot about his faith, which is interesting for him. But I thought we were going to talk about comparisons to Yugoslavia. If you'd like to talk about Yugoslavia, folks, I'd be happy to do about that. I was ahead of the game on Yugoslavia and following it intently from before it collapsed and throughout its collapse, and paid attention to it through open source media when the U.S. military wasn't paying any attention to it because I was based in Germany, and then ordered thousands and thousands of maps over the course of about 3 years. And so when the 1st Armed Division went to Bosnia in 1995, they were the only units that had maps, and only unit that had enough maps because I had ordered thousands, tens of thousands by the time it was over. So they had plenty of maps. And they were well prepared because we put together briefing packets and explained what was going on. But I did that. So I followed Yugoslavia for a long time. And much to my chagrin, I had been reassigned and moved on before they ever went. And then they went a few months after I left. And they spent a year there. But later, I got my opportunity to go to the Balkans and went to Bosnia and Croatia and also involved in the Kosovo campaign. So, yeah, I can talk about Yugoslavia all day. I'm not sure where Scott went with it, so I will take a look at it. Well, okay, so here's the thing. Okay, Hendo, I'll go ahead and talk about that real quick. Welcome to folks just coming in. Hey, from Connecticut, or Cape, that's Cape Town. Wes is in Cape Town, not Connecticut. Okay, let me see. Oops, I already got the lid off this. Hang on. All right, well, let me go with this, Hendo. So you want me to compare South Africa today, Yugoslavia today? Where are the Guptas? Do you have any idea? They're not here. Yeah, where are the Guptas? That's a good question. Where's Waldo? This is a very good question. What's going on? Where are we going to find the Guptas? They weren't even from South Africa. They went there recently, recent migrants into South Africa, and all this influence. Anyway, just shows you how effective influence peddling can be. So back to the Yugoslavia and South Africa comparison. Well, I wasn't prepared for that, but let's take a look at it. Let me look at some of the similarities. Well, in Yugoslavia, you had a federal system in which it was comprised of multiple republics and multiple ethnicities. So there are some similarities there with South Africa. The only difference being is it really didn't have a skin color difference, but you had people who were ostensibly, for the most part, all Slavic, a few who had Turkish ancestry, but very few. those Muslims who were present in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, were primarily secular Muslims who were Slavs who had converted when the Ottoman Turks controlled parts of Yugoslavia in order for them to retain their property, their influence, and not lose access to all that. So they became Muslims in name, if not in practice. So that's most of the people who were Bosniaks, as they called them in Bosnia later on, or Muslims throughout former Yugoslavia were actually, by and large, secular Muslims, and they were mostly Slavic by blood. So let's see. Yeah, no launch today, Matt. It'll be next Saturday. It'll be this Saturday. That's right. Hey, good to see you come on board here. Yeah, you came in just in time for the launch then. So you didn't want to hear anything I had to say, Matt. Okay, that's cool. No, but seriously. Very Dubai having a cocktail. I'll get back to the 1AD job there in a second. So, Leon, Leka. Well, thank you, Leon. Leon Kokomo. I think I got it right that time, the pronunciation. Yeah, so you had a federal system. You had all these different ethnicities and different religions. You had Muslims, secular Muslims, but some devout Muslims. You had Orthodox Christians. You had Roman Catholics. And generally speaking, Croats and Slovenes were Roman Catholic. The Serbs were Orthodox Christians. And then Montenegrins were a mix of Muslims and Orthodox. And then the Bosniaks were a mix of all three of those because you had Croats, Serbs, and Bosniaks inside there. Kosovo was primarily occupied by Muslims, Albanian Muslims for that matter. And so you had a mix of peoples in this former Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia meaning the land of the South Slavs. Well, what happened, this all started to fall apart. Kukumor. So the reason this all fell apart is you have to go back to what was happening in Yugoslavia. So from the end of the Second World War until 1980, Josip Broz Tito, Marshal Tito, kept that country together with an iron fist and with a secret police and controlling access to resources. He divided authority within the military, within the state apparatus, amongst the ethnicities so that all could be a part of it and see that they were prospering equally. Yugoslavia's economy grew rapidly from the late 1950s up to the early 1980s. And in fact, Yugoslavia was doing so well that they were shipping automobiles to the United States. For those who don't know, we used to get something known as the Yugo here in the U.S., the Yugo. Used to buy the small, low-cost, crappy, dangerous car that was imported to the U.S., which ostensibly met U.S. safety standards. I always question whether they actually did. But tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people bought the Yugo here in the U.S. for a number of years. When people stopped buying the Yugo, and the economy started stagnating in Yugoslavia in the mid-1980s, they started to run into trouble. But then ethnicity was used as a weapon by an ambitious politician named Slobodan Milosevic. In 1987, Slobodan Milosevic traveled to what's known as the Kosovo Ploži, and that's the Kosovo Plain where Kosovo is located in the south part of Yugoslavia, in land that the Serbs, as an ethnicity, felt is their own land. And I say that because they fought a battle there against the Turks in 1389, and their army was wiped out. Almost all the nobility from Serbia was wiped out. All the leadership was completely obliterated. The Ottoman Turks knocked them out. Well, the Turks, in their own mythology, their own cultural mindset, consider that the birth of the Serbian nation, 1389. So I don't know about you guys. If I got my butt kicked at Blood River and I was a Zulu, I wouldn't go, well, that's when we became Zulus. That's the proud moment. It probably would have been when we kicked if you were going to pick a date, it was obviously sooner than that for the Zulu nation, but maybe you pick a date like Isan Lawana where you kick the Brits' butt, and that's a big victory. But the Serbs picked a big loss in 1389. Well, in 1987, Slobodan Milosevic, in an effort to become popular within Serbia, traveled to the Kosovo Ploži. Now, Tito died in 1980. Many people predicted in 1980 that Yugoslavia was going to implode in 1980. I was a young man. I didn't know any better. I didn't know the history as well as I thought I did. And I said, oh my gosh, is Yugoslavia going to fall apart because the strong man is gone? It didn't. And it held on for a few more years until the economy declined. The one part was the economy declining. The second part was the stirring of ethnic nationalism for personal political ambitions. That's Slobodan Milosevic, one of them. And the third reason it fell is because the wall fell. And there was no support for this bipolar world. And Yugoslavs had no friends in the East and no friends in the West when it came to geopolitics. So it didn't make sense for the country to continue existing in that form because of that. So what happened is that Milosevic goes down there and he gives this big speech on the Kosovo Ploži on the anniversary of the battle. And he talks about how Serbs are being discriminated against inside Yugoslavia, how they're not being treated fairly, how despite being the largest ethnic group in Yugoslavia, that they don't get the lion's share of the resources, and this must change. On the strength of that, he became president of Serbia in the 1980s, and he used that platform to stir ethnic rivalry. Well, when the Cold War ended, the wall came down. Suddenly, different parts of Yugoslavia, seeing that they didn't like the way the system was run, decided to break away. We see Slovenia and Croatia in 1991 announcing they would break away and fighting a war. The Slovenes were prepared for the war, and they took the lessons. Kuburg, what are you guys talking about? Nuclear power plants? Yeah, Kuburg. That's just north of Cape Town. That's South Africa's only. It's a pebble bed reactor, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so the Slovenes broke away, and they fought a 9-day war with the JNA, the Yugoslav National Army, which was still comprised of soldiers from all over the country. And they attacked the police stations. They bombed the commercial aircraft at the airfield in the capital of Slovenia, Ljubljana. And then, but after 9 days, the Yugoslav government decided to pull back and just let Slovenia go its own way. And that's because Slovenia was about 90% ethnic Slovene. So there were very few Serbs or Croats located there, and it was geographically separated from Serbia with a cushion of Croatia in the middle. So the Serbs didn't care so much about it. They had no historical interest there. So they let it go. Slovenia had a long history, far more closely tied to the Austro-Hungarian Empire than it did to the other Slavic parts of Yugoslavia. So what happened next was there was a 6-month battle, or war, I should say, in Croatia, in the eastern part of Croatia, in Vukovar and Vikovici, which two of the settlements over there were actually obliterated by the conflict, as the Croatian armed forces were assembled and fought against the Yugoslav National Army and Serbian militias. And eventually that war ground to a halt after 6 months. UN deployed forces there. They occupied it for a period of time. And then later, in early 1992, Izetbegovic, the leader of the Bosniaks in Bosnia, decided to have a referendum on independence. People foolishly voted for it, and then suddenly the whole province, and now Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina, fell into chaos, and we know where it went from there. But this was all driven by personal political ambition. From 1945 until 1990, people in Yugoslavia got along. Religion wasn't a major factor. Now, there's embellishments, and I'm overstating the case here, but the facts back this up, that by and large, it wasn't simply because the police state had control and there were informants in places. It was because people got along. If you look at Sarajevo, for instance, which became one of the worst places for the conflict to take place, and the horrors that took place there, the rapes, the murders, the killing of your neighbors and such. Sarajevo, at the time that Bosnia voted for independence, 2/3 of all marriages that took place for several years in a row in Sarajevo were interethnic. Either a Serb was marrying a Croat was marrying a Muslim was marrying a Serb, and like that. They were interethnic. So people intermarried because the differences weren't that great. The differences were accentuated and exaggerated by politicians with ambitions, and those ambitions are what drove Yugoslavia apart. That plus the declining economic fortunes of the country combined. And then finally, the raison d'etre, the reason for existing in the first place as part of the East Bloc, no longer existed. Much like South Africa losing its Rugova, the threat from Red Menace, from Soviet communism, evaporating, your reason for existing is kind of up in the air now. And that's what happened in Yugoslavia. There's a lot more to it, but that's kind of the comparison where people use differences to accentuate them and divide people. So I don't know if that's really what you were looking for, but hopefully that helps a little bit, Hendo. Let me know if that's what you were looking for. I can talk more about it if you like. Let me catch up on the chat over here. Cuckoo more. Christian knowledge, you're very knowledgeable about a lot of things. Well, thank you, Enter Relax. I appreciate. Is that a guitar on your icon there? It's kind of cool. That was close. Cuckoo more is the closest breakdown I think that might work. Well, I'll have to hear you say it anyway. Sean says, my great-great-grandfather on my father's side is from that part of the world. They fled in the early 1900s. From Yugoslavia, Sean? That would make sense. They probably went to the U.S. if they fled from there, because we have a lot of Eastern European migrants. Yeah, the Yugo was the Trabant's cousin, yeah. But the Trabant actually got more famous. For some reason, people remember the Trabant more than they remember the Yugo. The Trabi, I guess because Eastern Germans kind of look back in fondness at the car they waited 15 years to get, and then it had a 3-stroke engine, couldn't climb hills, and belched pollution that would make, what's her name there, the little girl from Sweden, she would blanch. Which nuclear power station could be the next Chernobyl? I don't know about that, Lone Wolf. That's most nuclear power stations have pretty stringent measures in place. Of course, the Fukushima plant that had trouble and had the release in Japan after the earthquake and then the tsunami had a lot to do with human error. It wasn't a design issue. They had adequate measures in place, but they made some mistakes, and that's unfortunate. And that's probably where the next error will occur because of human error. Variable Vision says, very interesting. I don't regularly hear about federalist systems failing. What's the difference between successful and unsuccessful federal systems? Well, I think the key there when it comes to federal system is that you have to have an overarching thing that ties you together. In America, famously, of course, people can say, well, no, come on, hang on. Your country has been 85% white for most of its history, mostly Christian, mostly Anglo-Saxon. Yes, 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 and no, no, no. That's an oversimplification of the history of the United States. The one thing that has always united us is, well, two things, actually. The use of English as a national language, despite the fact that it's not our national language. And the second thing has always been the ideal, the concept of being American. It's not an ethnicity, it's a nationality. And it's something we've always pressed. We've always pressed patriotism. Well, until recent history, we've inculcated that in our progeny, and we've pushed that as the national ideal. But for some reason, there are people that don't like America in this country anymore, and they're trying to undermine that. But being an American is not an ethnicity. It is being a Nigerian is an ethnicity. And of course, there's further sub-ethnicities, of course, Igbo. You take your list, a whole different list of identities in Nigeria. But being an American is being an American. And this thing about being an African American or being an Italian American, fine. If you want to be called that, that's fine. But you're an American and you identify as an American, and that means something very specific to people. The concept of this boundless enthusiasm, this energy, this sense of community, despite the fact that people abroad seem to think that America is all about rugged individualism. Yeah, it is about rugged individualism. It's about accomplishment. It's about merit. But it's also about family and community. And that's oversimplified by the left in this country, who try to destroy our values and claim that we don't care about families and we don't care about taking care of the elderly or those who are less advantaged. That's just nonsense. America is the most charitable country in the world. People in this country give higher percentages of their disposable income to charitable organizations and to faith-based organizations than anywhere else in the world, historically, traditionally. It's just the nature of Americans. That doesn't make us special or unique. I'm just explaining what it is being American. And I think in a federal system, you have to have that overriding sense. Now, for us, the one strong thing that is in place is that for whatever happened, whatever the reason was, at the outset, we were an incredibly fortunate country in that the United States had arguably the greatest fortune. The stars aligned just perfectly. The people who were in our country at the time, who backed the idea for revolution, who broke away from the British Empire, and those who fought for our independence, and those who later drafted our Constitution, were among some of the brightest minds ever when it comes to governance. And we were incredibly, I wish we had a handful of those people today. So amazing, the people involved in the early part of our history. Now, we had a small country, and maybe that played a role in this sense of identity. I think all of that plays a role. You have to have a sense of identity. Switzerland has multiple ethnicities and has multiple languages, yet people identify as Swiss. You have to build a national identity. And this is the argument I make when it comes to Africa all the time. Excuse me. Botswana has developed a national identity. If you go to Botswana, people identify as a Motswana. Ke Motswana. I am a Botswana. I'm from Botswana. So they've successfully done that. People don't usually sit around and go, well, I'm a white guy from Botswana, or I'm an Afrikaner from Botswana, or I'm a Mangwato. They may know they're a Mangwato, but they don't run around the world saying, I'm a Mangwato. First off, nobody would know what a Mangwato is from the Mangwato tribe, but only people in South Africa and Botswana would know what that is, but they're from Botswana. That's a national identity. And yes, when South Africans are abroad, they identify as South Africans. And when you ask them, they say they're South Africans. But by and large, that is a surface identification. It's not the overriding identification. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I mean, if you're an Afrikaner, you're a Boer, if you recognize yourself as a Boer, you recognize yourself as an Afrikaner, you recognize yourself as Xhosa, Zulu, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't have the overarching identity as a South African, which guides your views and your actions, then you can run into problems. As society can get bifurcated and divided along ethnic, religious, political lines. So I think the key to federalism is an overarching identity that people latch onto, and that is the most important identity they have when it comes to the state. I think that's really important. So let's see what else we got here. HBA Mayor says, SA, we won't have it for long by the looks of it. So similar to South Africa. Cigarettes gone, government gone. Strange that today Serbia and Turkey are regional allies at Kosovians' dismay. Well, I think the case of Serbia and Turkey is just bedfellows. It's a case of bedfellows. Turkey is looking for lots of global influence, and they're getting it in Africa. They've got it in Somalia. Now they have it in Libya. They didn't have any influence in Libya previously. The last time that now the Turks have historical reason for being there. The Ottoman Turks, of course, controlled North Africa, and the Italians attacked there in 1911, 1912, and defeated the Ottoman Turks. And so it's not surprising that Turkey has an interest in Libya, because historically they were there for centuries under the Ottoman Empire. And before that, the Byzantine Empire controlled it for a long time. So it's a natural place for them to go. But the Turks are looking for glory and international influence, and they're getting it. While people are looking the other way, they're not paying attention to anything that Turkey is doing in Africa, in Somalia, in Ethiopia, in Libya. It's passing unnoticed. The fact that Turkish Airlines now has flights over much of West Africa and had none just a decade ago. It's quite interesting to watch the Turks spread their wings. Now, I had no objections to Turkey, but that was before the current despot became in charge of the country and has turned it from a secular state with a military that backed and guaranteed the secularism of the country into a sort of pseudo-religious state in which it's run by a totalitarian. And intellectuals, military officers, police, teachers, businessmen are locked up without any liberties or rights and sent away in prisons for years and years without trial on charges that don't exist. The fact that the world is not coming down on Turkey for its human rights abuses is quite sad and shocking. Probably has a lot to do with the fact that they're a NATO member and that they're perpetually looking for entry into the European Union. The European Union is focusing on keeping them out of the European Union, while the world is ignoring the fact that they're committing these atrocities against their own citizens. Cooper's well run. You guys should get next. They don't generate electricity anymore now, just the medical grade crap. Oh, okay. Hendo says, oh, got ahead of me there. Hendo says, ANC won't blow without CCP criminal government propping up ANC giving Chinese loans, debt trap. Which loans from the Chinese? I haven't seen any loans from the Chinese. Are you predicting they're going to get it? Yugoslavia's politicians sound like today's SA politicians. Yeah, in some respects they absolutely do. 3 kilometers from where you stay. Okay. Cheers. Vernon, welcome. Good to see you here. Oh, Greta. Yeah, Greta Thunberg. Thanks, Kyle. Greta Thunberg. That's what I was trying to remember. You guys are chatting each other. Under which president did you serve? Okay, Leon Kukumor. I served under President Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Trump. 7 presidents, 36 years. Yep. But my retirement letter is signed by Donald Trump, which I'm quite happy to have. I'm glad it wasn't Barry Obama. Could do without that. Let's see. So, Vinny from Mox says, I see on news Nigeria has no more money to import food. Oof. Debt getting bigger, another African country going down. Yeah, Nigeria just got a loan from the World Bank for $3.4 billion, but so what? They're losing probably $30 billion in oil revenue this year from declining oil prices and lack of demand. So that loss of $30 billion of foreign currency exchange is going to crush Nigeria, and $3.4 billion is not going to save the day. Robin, hey Robin. Heard that Bosniaks were originally Poles from the southern part of Poland who migrated to the Balkans. I'm not aware of that. To my knowledge, most of the people who are Bosniaks are overwhelmingly Serbs who lived in the area and converted to Islam, at least secularly converted to Islam so that they wouldn't be deprived of their property and their rights. By DNA, many of those people are actually Slavs, South Slavs from the area. Some of them were Serbs, of course. And then there is a slight mix of Turkish blood in there. Because there was some intermarriage with Turkish rulers and who controlled the area for centuries. But primarily they're Slavs. I'm not aware of the Polish connection. Maybe that's there, but I've never heard that before. What happened to South Africa's nukes? They were decommissioned before the world that was observed by international observers to make sure that it was actually a true story. And that's what happened. Nukes were done. Okay. Bite your ankles. Let me see. You guys have a lot of... Okay. Botswana is well governed. Yes, it is. Around here, a Boer can be a farmer or a politician. Sure, why not? Hendo, America's problem today is the creature of Jekyll Island, a.k.a. Federal Reserve Bank, and the banksters on Wall Street can't pay the debt back, lose their national reserve status. Well, we can pay the debt back, and that's in no small measure from the fact that the government has colluded with the central bank to keep interest rates artificially low for 4 decades. So since the 1980s, our interest rates have been artificially low here. since the end of the high inflation period, and they've kept them low to make credit easy. And so most of our debt is at 2% or less that we're repaying. So after inflation, the U.S. government's actually making money and repaying the debt. There you go. The Federal Reserve is definitely a challenge, particularly with the quantitative easing. That's gobbledygook for printing money by flooding the money supply, which they did under the Obama administration to the tune of billion or trillions of dollars. And so it devalued the dollar, and they're doing it again now. They offered to put as much as $4 trillion into the money supply. So you have the M1, the M2, and the M3, terms that aren't really discussed much by economists anymore, but that's different types of money supply. One is actual cash, another is just instruments to identify cash. And the money supply has been flooded by the Federal Reserve, weakening our currency and not helping any of us out, since the US dollar and the euro are the only two true international currency reserves on the planet these days. 20% of Standard Bank is owned by China. Really? I didn't know that. I'll have to take a look at that, because Standard Bank is a publicly traded company, is it not? I'll have to take a look at that. Reagan and Trump for the win. I'll go along with that. Reagan was an amazing president. It's just a shame the way his presidency ended with his health in poor condition. And just as Cyril keeps running to China for business investments, it comes with strings attached, dodgy dealings. Well, yeah, you should stay away from the Chinese for those deals. I agree. Yep. So, well, once again, folks, those tuning in, we've hit 1 hour here since we started the recast after it got cut off. My apologies for that. This was supposed to be a stream to watch and celebrate the launch of the Demo 2 mission, a joint NASA SpaceX manned space flight from the Cape Canaveral launch pad 39 Alpha, which is where Apollo 11 launched off of, the historic launch pad, was supposed to take place today at 4:33 Eastern Standard Time, or 10:33 in South Africa, in Gaborone, Botswana. Unfortunately, weather conditions, despite the fact that Donald Trump was present, weather led to the mission being scrubbed for today after the two astronauts, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, had sat in the capsule for approximately 3 hours. I bet that sucked. The mission has been scrubbed today and will be rescheduled for the 30th of May, and hopefully that will happen. But there was a lot of excitement for this launch today, and I appreciate those of you tuning in for the stream. Hope you've enjoyed it so far. We made a shift after the thing was scrubbed about a half hour ago or 20 minutes ago to talking about other events, and the issue of Yugoslavia compared to South Africa came up, and then other questions about South Africa. So I'm going on about that because I seem to have an audience left here that's interested in it, so we'll talk a bit more about that. Let's see what else we got here to say. Robin says, what about Saudi Arabia? Is Trump trying to teach a lesson to the Saudi ruler for crushing the crude oil? Why did Trump remove patriots? The deal with the Saudi Arabia is a complicated relationship. It has nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the U.S. and with Riyadh. It goes back to our early support for the Al Saud family over a century ago. And it kind of continues today. It's a complicated geopolitical relationship where the Saudis, by and large, have support our interest. Although saying that sounds kind of ironic, because I know that many of the people who are involved in Al-Qaeda and involved in terrorism actually originate from Saudi Arabia, and that the state bears some responsibility for not dealing with them themselves. But the issue specifically about oil that's going on is that Trump, a while ago, several weeks ago, tried to get Saudi Arabia to cut production, get Russia to cut production, because he and economists working around him saw that the demand for oil was going to decline, but production would continue, and that oil storage would become a serious problem. And when oil storage became a problem, because a lot of wells have to be in operation continuously, you can't cap them. You may never be able to uncap them. They won't be productive. They won't be profitable. So their goal was to get production to be cut for the wells that could be cut to reduce production. Like the Saudis is easy. I mean, the Saudis is like turning your tap on. They just barely stick the pipe in the ground and the oil just flows out. It's just right there. There's so much of it. It's high grade. And so Saudi oil really matters in the world market. And they can also shift production. You can go from 6 million to 10 million to 12 million barrels just like that. They have the facilities. They have the ability to pump it. And so they can have a big influence on the marketplace, bigger than most countries. So we tried to get the Saudis and the Russians to cut production before oil collapsed, and they agreed to do it, but they didn't really do it, and not enough people cut production. So we have a glut of oil, a dearth of demand for oil and energy around the world today because of this ridiculous lockdown. And so the oil market collapsed. And we saw briefly for one day that oil futures for May were trading at minus $37 a barrel, which meant that if you were paying a middleman $37 to store your oil, so every barrel of oil you produced, whatever it cost you to produce it, which was probably $15, $20, or $30 to produce the barrel, on top of that, you were losing another $37 just for them to take it off your hands. It was either that or risk the fact in many producers you cannot produce any oil in the future, and then you make nothing. So really upside down world. And that's what Trump was trying to avoid with that. And so that's where that came from. So Saturday we try again. Yes, Hank, we'll try again on Saturday. We'll see if we get it to go. Variable visions. Okay. I know 20% stake. Is that still the case? No, you didn't miss it. My mother's on here. Hey, Mom. You didn't miss it. The launch did not take place. Your nap is okay. Welcome aboard. The launch was scrubbed because of the weather. There were thunderstorms around Cape Canaveral, and so it did not take place. So nobody missed anything other than me chatting away for the last hour or so. And for those of you who came with me early on the stream, you know that we got cut off once again, which hadn't happened in over a week, so I'm kind of bummed out about that. But yeah, it will be Saturday is when the launch is supposed to be now. And President Trump was in Florida, so I'm sure he's disappointed as well. But hopefully he'll take advantage of the trip and visit the Florida governor and have a little word with him about what's going on in Florida with the lockdown. So Lone Wolf, China main bank paid $5 billion for... Yeah, I have to check into that, Lone Wolf. That's interesting. By the way, for folks who don't know it, 6 of Canada's largest banks, I think maybe it's 7 now, are actually owned by the Chinese. And that's been the case for 2 decades. China's influence in Canada is quite large, and most people don't even know that, including Canadians. Now, of course, a lot of people know that Vancouver is jokingly called Hongcouver because so many Hong Kong-based Chinese migrated there in the 80s and 90s and even into the aught decade. But in the build-up to China having Hong Kong turned over in 1997 by the UK, a lot of ethnic Chinese went to Canada to set up property, residences, and where possible get citizenship or permanent residency, and then transit back and forth between Hong Kong, just in case the Chinese would try the nonsense they're trying now, which is subjugating the Hong Kong residents to Chinese communism. So so China's had a long influence there, but it's beyond that Hong Kong influence. Now it's mainland China. In fact, if you go to Vancouver these days, you'll see a distinct breakdown between ethnic Chinese, those who are historic Hong Kong Chinese, and those who come from mainland communist China Chinese more recently. And you can see that there's not exactly a community that's in sync. Just the fact they're ethnic Chinese doesn't mean that they get along. And you can see that because Westerners or white Canadians are actually now not a majority in Vancouver. They're just, I don't even think they're a plurality anymore. They're pretty down there, almost even with the second highest ethnic group. That is happy, didn't know that. A lot of fingers and a lot of pies. Yeah, they do. Oh, the Chinese in Canada, yeah. Actually, Hendo says Canada is screwed. Hong Kong will be Chinese wasteland soon. Yeah, no, the Chinese are trying to destroy it. The people are asking a lot of questions about what's going on in Hong Kong. Why are the Chinese behaving the way they are? Well, because they can get away with it. Although Trump has threatened them, and our government has threatened them with legislation and tariffs and punitive tariffs as a result of what's happening there. Really, the Chinese can get away with what they want. It's not like anyone is going to respond to the military force to protect Hong Kong, and it's right there on mainland China. All they have to do is roll across the border and do what they want. So people in Hong Kong are in a really tough spot as the Chinese seek to assert that. Now, the thing is that for the last 2 decades, China has needed Hong Kong. Because HSBC, all the banks, all the businesses had ties to the West, and much of what China was doing was learning from Hong Kong or going through Hong Kong to do its business with the world in many respects. But they don't need that anymore. The world is dependent on China for so many things because so many shameless industrialists have shipped their production to China to save a few dollars, a few rand, a few euros, a few pounds. And now much of the world is stripped of industrial capacity, even though it's perfectly capable of having industrial capacity. And as you can see, if you go try to buy things today here in the U.S., it's difficult to get things like a laptop or to get spare parts for computers. And it will be more difficult to get things like industrial parts because they're manufactured exclusively in China, or the components are made in China and brought from overseas to assemble here in the U.S. So the reliance on China was a foolhardy geostrategic miscalculation by most countries around the world. And we see this with the unreliability of the Chinese Communist Party and its distortion of the Wuhan coronavirus and its lies and outright deception about the lethality, the transmittability of the Wuhan coronavirus and what's been happening. So China, I'm not castigating China. I'm not saying they're evil. But what I'm saying is that people become overly dependent on them, and it's causing real problems. And so we'll see what happens going forward. Wesley says, "What is the required length to be abroad? To be aboard a space shuttle?" Oh, I think you mean what's the height requirement. Wesley, I don't know. I think you're asking is what is the height requirement to be on a shuttle? Well, Apparently, it's shorter than I am because General Bolden there, the photograph for those, I'll bring that back up now. I'll do a little more of this shameless showing off here, but it's not really. I think this is interesting. So when I was based in Ethiopia, for those who didn't catch this part earlier, this is Major General Chuck Bolden, who was the NASA administrator under Obama from 2009 till 2017. And there he is and his wife, both of whom are short, next to me. He barely came up to my chin. But he was a Marine two-star pilot who became a shuttle pilot, a commander, and flew the space shuttle and then later became the NASA administrator. He's 73 years old now, but that was about 6 years ago. So he would have been 67 then. Anyway, maybe he shrank because he was older, but I don't know what the height requirement is if that was what the question was. Yeah, but that's Major General Chuck Bolden. So I hear England had a 50-year deal with Hong Kong after giving up. Yeah, there were certain requirements and agreements that were made with English about certain status for Hong Kong nationals and so on. I don't know all the details of that, but the Chinese have Hong Kong, and they're going to do what they want to do. And the world is not going to intervene to change that. And I think China knows that. And so they've done what they want to do on a slow basis, but that will pick up as time progresses. It's unfortunate. China's evil. Lone Wolf said it. Well, I won't dispute it. I'm not going to attack China because China can actually do some good. But the Chinese Communist Party is a real problem for the world. Variable Vision says, will be Wesley Young, there's no height requirement for being abroad. There's no height requirement for being abroad. I'm not going to touch that one. Okay. Chris, aren't you just tall? Well, Leon Kukamore. I'm 6'2", so I guess for a lot of people that's tall, but it's not particularly tall. It's above average height for humans. And if you look at Homo sapiens 300 years ago, I am really tall. They'd call me Edward Longshanks, who's actually one of my ancestors, by the way. Edward Longshanks is my ancestor. Yeah, not the nicest of monarchs of England. Certainly from the Scots' perspective, he's not one of the nicest. But Edward Longshanks, one of my ancestors on my Wyatt side. Yeah, I would definitely be a Longshanks with these long legs. But China, coronavirus, world lockdown, economy down. Yeah, Hank, that makes a lot of sense. And I know a lot of people are frustrated by that. But yeah, the Chinese, what are you going to do? Call them out, I guess, is it. But yeah, so we were talking earlier about Yugoslavia. I hope that that discussion was what folks were looking for and what they wanted to know about it. But I think there are some parallels between Yugoslavia in 1987, not 92, certainly from up to 92, but 1987 is really where it started, I think. Oh, that's right. Thank you. My Ranger Boy. What was my job in 1st Armored Division? Well, I was assigned to the 3rd Armored Division in Gelnhausen, Germany. And I was an assistant battalion S2. That's an intelligence officer. Went to the Gulf War, came back, became the actual S2, and then was supposed to go to Augsburg to work for the military intelligence organization down there, which would have been kind of cool. But I was told later that I was assigned to the aviation brigade in Hanau, which was driving distance from where I was at. So I suddenly, instead of walking to work every day about 150 meters down the street through the gate into the building where I worked at, I had to drive every day. So I went to Hanau, and that's where I worked at. Now, we were still 3rd Armored Division after we came back from the war, but at one point, one of the strangest things happened in U.S. military history. The 3rd Armored Division went away, the 8th Infantry Division went away, and the 1st Armored Division moved its flag from Bavaria to Rhineland-Pfalz to Bad Kreuznach, which was where the headquarters of the 8th Infantry Division was. So they took over the facilities and the personnel of the 8th Infantry Division headquarters, and only a few of the headquarters people moved from 1st Armored Division up to Bad Kreuznach, and they pretty much inherited that staff. They also inherited our brigade, which was 4th Brigade, the Aviation Brigade with the Cav Squadron, from 3rd Armored Division, and we became 4th Brigade, 1st Armored Division overnight. And then they got the 8th Infantry Division, 2nd Brigade, which is a bomb holder. That became part of it. So we wound up being 3 divisions. Nothing came from 1st Armored Division. Everything that was part of this division was from 3rd and 8th ID, except for a few personnel who were transferred up from Bavaria. But we were renamed the 1st Armored Division, and we would go to division exercises as a division staff officer. I went to these things, and we would see people wearing the 8th Infantry Division patch on their sleeve, the 1st Armored Division patch, and the 3rd Armored Division. So I went to an exercise in Bad Kreuznach, and there were people from different units, and we were all supposed to be wearing the same division patch, but we were all wearing 3 different patches. It was very entertaining and comical. We did that for about 3 or 4 months until All of it was reflagged as the 1st Armored Division based in Bad Kreuznach, and that was an effort to keep Bad Kreuznach open, which had been open since the Second World War and been home to the 8th Infantry Division since the 1950s, but the 8th Infantry Division was now gone. Eventually, Bad Kreuznach is well closed, and there you have it. So I was an intelligence officer as an assistant brigade S2, and then later as a brigade S2. And then later, I deployed, after I'd left the 1st Armored Division in 1998, I went back to Bosnia as the Task Force Counterintelligence Coordinating Authority, or TIFKICA. And as the TIFKICA, I was based in Tuzla and responsible for coordinating human intelligence and counterintelligence operations within the Multinational Division North, which included the U.S. forces, a brigade from the U.S., aviation from the U.S., the Swedes, the Norwegians. The Allied Military Intelligence Battalion was located there, not part of us, but it was located in the same area. We had a Turkish battalion. We had a Russian brigade. Yeah, we had a Russian brigade as part of our division, folks. Yeah, people say we can't work with Russia. We did it in Bosnia. Every day, a Russian general sat in our command briefing and got the briefing about what was going on. We shared intelligence with the Russians. We had a special classification to share things just with the Russians. So when people say you can't work with the Russians, you can't work with the Chinese, they just don't know what they're talking about. Anything is possible. And we did it effectively in Bosnia. Now, were the Russians honest with us? No. Didn't expect them to be honest with us. Just expected them to fulfill their mission, and they did. So, yeah, that's what I did in Bosnia. Now, I also had most of the countries were supposed to be coordinating their human intelligence and counterintelligence with me. I was a captain, but I knew better. I knew that many of them were running their own operations and not telling us about it, which makes it difficult to coordinate and deconflict so that you don't have undercover or intelligence operatives showing up from one country to visit a mayor, and then 2 hours later another country comes, and later in the day. So what you wind up seeing is you see government officials in Tuzla and in Bosnia who aren't corrupt, but because they're visited by so many countries offering them things for friendship, that they have a liquor cabinet full of Chivas Regal, full of Russian vodka, full of all kinds of things. So it was a bit challenging. But anyway, part of my job was trying to figure out who was not telling me what they should be telling me, which made my job challenging, but quite interesting. And that was the last of my affiliations with the 1st Armored Division. And that was just because I was assigned to them temporarily. And I was based in Italy then. So that's my relationship with the 1st Armored Division. Punisher saying good night. Got to go. Yeah, it's getting kind of late there. It is now 11 o'clock in South Africa. So let's see what else we got here. Postponed. Yes, for folks, the weather was too bad. So the Demo 2 mission to the International Space Station on the NASA SpaceX mission on the Falcon 9 spacecraft rocket with the Crew Dragon capsule is postponed until Saturday. So hopefully that's not disappointing people too much. Right. Okay, so Punisher's taking off. Everybody's saying so long. Well, thanks for being with us, Punisher. Appreciate it. Any other questions out there, folks? Since now we're just kind of got some open space here, before I just go ahead and close this thing out. If anyone's got questions, we'll talk about something else here. But let me do some housekeeping in the meantime, some of my free advertising for folks that I want to see do well. So here we go. So first off, let me... what's that? Oh, that was the tornado announcement, yeah. So this is from Impulse Graphics. This is from Talon Bezuidenhout. Talon is the person who makes the graphics that I've been using of late. For those who haven't seen them, let me just try and pull one of them up and see what you guys think of this. And if you guys like this or not. And this is the work of Talon. So if you're interested in looking for someone to help you with your graphics, things you're working on. So this is the thing I use for the opening of a lot of my videos now, although today's didn't have it. I just saw a question from Dagaboy. Dagaboy, when you say last stream, do you mean what was supposed to be the stream for the launch? I got cut off. It just got disconnected. That happens. It's been happening less frequently lately. I thought I'd fixed it, but again, it came back to bite me. So I'm not really sure why that is, but it did happen. So anyway, that's from Talon. And if you're looking for graphic design, need some help doing some animations and such, you guys tell me what you think of that. But let me see. This is another one from him. Yeah, so those are kind of cool. Yeah, those are from Talon. So that's Talon Bezuidenhout. There's the information right there. You can check it out if you want to. Was the Engineer Brigade Commander Colonel Steve Hawkins. Which Engineer Brigade? With 3rd Armored Division or 1st Armored Division? The name doesn't sound familiar. I worked with the 130th Combat Engineers in Hanau, who I think were part of either the Corps or they were part of First. I think they were part of First Armored Division later. But anyway, no, I'm not familiar with that named Ranger. So let's see. That's that. And then for those who like the character that appears on my channel, this is from Schenk Art, based in Bloemfontein, South Africa. They do caricatures, and they've done Sia Khaleesi, they've done Joe Black, the musician, with his beard, not his COVID-19 shave visage, where he shaved off his beard for the lockdown. But they do characters. You can check them out at schenk.co.za. And they're rather inexpensive. It's a nice gift to give to family or friends. They do a little caricature of them. That's me there. Obviously, you haven't figured that out, with the Springbok jersey and the flag, wearing my bandana. And those are, in fact, my muscular calves and thighs. They are quite impressive. I think the head's a little oversized, but Schenk Art can do this for you, too. Check them out at schenk.co.za. And I think in Afrikaans they say pin instead of dot. So that's that. And of course, I have pointed this one out before, and now it's oversized because I had her on. But Giselle is a Namibian based in Pretoria. She sings in Afrikaans. She does folk music and country music in English and Afrikaans. She has an English country music album. And her latest album is Fit Ons Mense, a fantastic anthem about Afrikaans. And she's wonderful. You can catch her on my channel. Go back to my past live streams. It's also the highlighted video on my channel at the top there. And you can watch a free concert of hers. It's an hour and 3 minutes long. Check it out. That's Giselle. She is a musician based in South Africa who sings in Afrikaans. And for those who watched the live stream back on May 8th, you correctly pointed out that she has a funny accent. What I mean by funny is she is from Namibia, and people picked that out right away because it's a very different accent. It's not a Western Cape accent. It's not a High Veld accent. But anyway, people were able to pick that out. So 1RB says, do you think that Trump firing all the inspector generals are due to the fact that they might want to hamper him with frivolous investigations? No, I do not. I think that that's, first off, the media being disingenuous and dishonest. The current inspector general was not fired. The current inspector general, who was just relieved, was a temporary official who still has a job and was filling the position in the short term, not long term. Kind of like the director of national intelligence, the former ambassador to Germany, who was brought in to do that job. In short term, that appointment can only be done because it's a particular one has to have Senate approval for like 90 days. And so he was brought in to fill that gap until the president can get someone in there appointed and confirmed by the Senate. So no, I don't think it has anything to do with that. There is a perfectly acceptable legal system that's in place. If people want to challenge Trump's authority on this, they can do that. But he is certainly entitled to have whoever he wants around him. Now, I know many people who've been inspector generals, know them personally, and I know that these are positions beyond reproach. So any kind of stink, whether it's legitimate or not, and whether a person did something or not, can have an impact on whether they stay in place as an attorney general. So, not I say attorney general, inspector general, IG. Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with them hampering the frivolous. Well, do I think they're hampering the frivolous investigations? I think that they're not simply moving at the pace that Trump expects them to move to go after criminal things that have taken place. Trump is angry, and Trump has a right to be angry. He's been the target of pointless and fruitless and invalid, frivolous investigations that have damaged his presidency. And what's amazing is he's accomplished all the things he did accomplish despite this, and in the face of it. So I think that Trump is certainly right to get rid of people who aren't moving forward. Frankly, I mean, I'm surprised that Wray is still the director of the FBI. What is the FBI doing to clean out the vipers in its nest who've committed felonies and violated constitutional rights and civil liberties? I don't know. Christopher Wray doesn't seem to be doing that. Now, I don't have the inside knowledge on what's happening in the FBI, and maybe he's doing it at a pace that Trump's fine with. But frankly, from what I know from the outside, I would have fired Christopher Wray a long time ago. But maybe after Trump's reelected, he will fire Christopher Wray. I don't know. And maybe I'm just wrong on Christopher Wray. But I'm not surprised that the inspector generals are being removed or pushed aside when they're not getting things done. But the press will paint this, of course, as he's doing it because they're investigating him, which is just utter nonsense. Trump said he would shut down social media if he finds out they have anything to do with our voting here in the States. Yeah, the problem with shutting down social media is he has no ability to shut down social media. He doesn't control social media. There's no law that allows him to do it. There are federal laws governing interstate communications through the Federal Communications Commission, but the president doesn't have the authority through executive order to shut down social media, and he doesn't have the authority to direct things to be shut down. You have to violate some sort of federal law, and then you can be gone after by the Attorney General, the Justice Department, and the FBI. But short of that, it's kind of like when Trump said, the states that refuse to reopen, they'll reopen, he'll make them. He doesn't have that authority in our system. And I'm moving more and more to Trump's side on issues, but these, I think, they're just bluster meant to get people focused on getting their act together. But he can't make life difficult, but that's about all I can do. Doxson says Trump says a lot of things about Twitter, and for good reason. Yeah, well, Twitter is just ridiculous. So Trump says an opinion, and Twitter fact checks him. The Chinese Communist Party spews their propaganda each and every day, directly and through their bots and their paid agents on Twitter. And Twitter has never refuted any of the garbage the Chinese Alyssa Milano opens her crack hole every single hour and spews venom and defamation against the president and against all sorts of people that she doesn't agree with. And she's never been ever chastised or had her account suspended by Twitter. Twitter is a joke. It's an absolute joke. And I know a lot of people rely on it, but I don't. Because it's full of vindictive, nasty people. There's also a lot of good people on there, but there's a lot of bad content on Twitter that just makes it not worthwhile. And the guy that runs the company is a shameful turd. He is. Pay attention to what he does, not what he says. Thank you, Doxson. That's my statement with Donald Trump. He says all kinds of things, and that's not what matters with Donald Trump. What matters with Donald Trump is what he does. He'll say all sorts of things because he's the biggest troll in the world. He loves to troll his opponents. He loves to bully them or to challenge them and make them do things. But in the end, what he does is what matters. What someone says and what they do are very different. If we simply went off of what Joe Biden said, about half the time Joe Biden would be a wonderful candidate. He says wonderful things when he's not stepping on his crank. But what Joe Biden does is absolutely nothing. In 40 years in the government, he's done nothing. Not a damn thing. You can't attach anything to him except his support for the crime bill, which criminalized a lot of African-American men. What are you going to tie to him? What is he famous for? What legislation carries his name that's memorable? Nothing. What did he do as vice president? Nothing. We can look, Dick Cheney did lots of stuff as vice president. We can even look at Mike Pence, what he's doing, leading the National Coronavirus Task Force, things that he's done that are tangible. But kind of like Dan Quayle, what did Joe Biden do as vice president other than step on his crank all the time? So you got to look at what people do. In politics, they say all kinds of things. It's what they do. A lot of people were angry with Barack Obama when he became president because he did this, he did this, he did this. What is he doing? And I turned to them, I said, what are you surprised by? That's what the guy said he was going to do. He said he was going to fundamentally change America. He said he was going to do this, he was going to do this. You just didn't take him his word. So you're sorry you voted for him? Well, that's your fault. I didn't vote for the guy. I took him at his word that he was going to do exactly what he did. And he tried to do exactly what he did from the outset. Not a damn thing that Barack Obama did was a surprise, except for his lies about capitalism and his lies about what happened in the 2008 financial crisis, which was not a failure of capitalism. It was a failure of unwarranted government intrusion into the marketplace with things that distorted market outcomes. And they so contorted and distorted the market outcomes that they led to a collapse. It wasn't greedy bankers. It wasn't careless consumers. It was both of those things and government intrusion. But the biggest factor was government intrusion. Forcing banks to loan money to people who are not creditworthy so they could borrow money simply based on the color of their skin, that's ridiculous. You make a credit decision based on the worthiness of the borrower. If they're black and they're rich and they can pay it back, great. If they're black and they're poor and they can't pay it back, they're not going to get credit. If they're white and they're rich, great. If they're white and they're poor and they can't pay it back, they don't get the money. It's as simple as that. But government trying to seek equal outcomes instead of equal opportunities is what caused this meltdown in the subprime mortgage market. And that led to the 2008 financial crisis, which many countries still deal with the aspects of today and the fallout from it today. Yeah, so Barack Obama denigrated capitalism. He said capitalism has failed. And he lied, and people listened to it because they drank that Kool-Aid. And it's just utter lies. Capitalism didn't fail. We don't have capitalism in America. There is market intrusion in unwarranted ways. Why does the state of Pennsylvania run the liquor stores? What is that all about? Those are state-owned enterprise. Why are they owning something that should be a private enterprise? That's a historical anachronism. That comes from law tied to religious values that are no longer in play in this state. Yet the state of Pennsylvania owns the liquor stores. And when they went to lockdown, they closed them. So you can't buy hard liquor or wine. Why? No explanation, simply tyranny from the government. And that's unwarranted intrusion in the marketplace. Now, I'm not advocating the government has no role in regulating the marketplace. In order for a marketplace to be free and fair and opportunity for all, the government does need to exist to properly ensure that people have equal opportunity within it. Not equal outcomes, equal opportunity. And so Barack Obama told lie after lie about the capitalist market system, and this is one of the reasons why I have all these idiots running around who graduate from Ivy League schools with degrees in economics, yet can't even figure out how interest rates work or the joblessness rate works, and somehow get elected to Congress from New York. Without saying who that is, I guess you can figure that out on your own. Let's see. Obama reincarnated. Biden got jobs for his family. He did, RB. That's right. He's very successful getting jobs and huge amounts of money for his family. I'm sorry, but Biden comes off as senile. Yeah, well, I think he is probably senile there, Robin. Tom Wolf alert. Ohio does too. Yeah, they kept ours open as essential. Yeah, well, and they kept the liquor stores in Ohio essential. Well, that's a different approach. I like that approach. I don't drink much alcohol, but a lot of people do drink it, and they're actually dependent on it. So, this whole state-run stores is just kind of an historic. When I was a kid in Maryland, we had the blue laws, and the blue laws were tied to the colonial era, going way back and influenced by religion. And basically stores couldn't be open except for certain hours and not on the weekends. And so it was a real break in commerce. And it took decades for those laws to be rolled back. But some of the pieces of those laws still exist in places like in Pennsylvania, where the local liquor store, which is less than a kilometer from where I'm sitting, is owned by the state and was closed until this past week when they lowered our lockdown to level, I don't know, what are we on? I have no idea. I think we're on level yellow now. Kind of keep track of it. Hendo, you're still there. Good to see you. In America, you have corporate fascism masking itself as classical capitalism. Too big to fail would not exit in a real capital. Exactly right. Exactly right. Too big to fail is, there should be no such thing as too big to fail. Also, we shouldn't have monopolies, and we shouldn't allow companies to get away with the sorts of things a lot of companies get away with. But here's the thing. A company that starts out with drive and ambition and an interesting idea and finds a market or creates a market and runs with it and becomes fabulously wealthy, seems to have a tendency to find ways to make itself a socialist entity. I mean, look at all these tech companies who had all these great ideas. They took advantage of an infrastructure that was around them, a workforce that was around with ingenuity, with laws that allowed them to take advantage of their ideas and profit from them. And then every chance they get, once they have theirs, they try to stop competition. Look at Microsoft. Microsoft, its monopolistic practices with its crappy browser, Internet Explorer, retarded the growth of the internet for a few years because they kept pushing and passing off their crappy software with their operating system and then targeting Netscape when it was a far superior product. Netscape went from nothing with Jim Clark and Mark Anderson to being a $643 million a year revenue company, which isn't even impressive today, but was all the more impressive in the mid-1990s, say 95, when they achieved that. Or 90, I think it was 97, when it was 96 when they achieved it. But they achieved that in the 90s, going from nothing to $600+ million in sales, and was a profitable company, eventually driven out of business by the anti-competitive practices of Microsoft. Now, Netscape gave away its browser. I downloaded their browser repeatedly. Millions of people did. It was a fantastic browser. Their mail program was really good. Their POP3 client was really wonderful. But they made their money not from the browser, just like Acrobat. Adobe gives away Acrobat so you can open documents. But the software to make the documents that companies need to convert them into that and to manipulate it is something you buy. So they make the money from that, and then anybody can read the documents. The same sort of thing happened with Netscape. They made the software for the back office so that people could run websites using Netscape software, and they sold that, and they sold a license of that to businesses, and they made that money from that. And they gave you and I the browser for free. Microsoft gave us the browser free, and they did jack behind the scenes because they were making their money off the operating system. Their only goal was to drive a competitor out of business while they foisted their horrible Internet Explorer on us. And we still have it today, or whatever it's called now, the stupid name for it. But anyway, yeah, so it's funny how these companies become successful. And look at the billionaire Warren Buffett, who makes this ridiculous comment a few years ago. Well, my secretary pays less in taxes than I do. Or no, I pay less in tax. I pay less in taxes than my secretary does, and I'm a billionaire. Well, that's a lie, and it's also disingenuous. Warren Buffett pays a many more times tax than his secretary pays. But he's going off of the tax rate because much of his income is derived from dividends from Berkshire Hathaway. The dividends he gets from Berkshire Hathaway are taxed at a lower rate because that's the way the tax system is set up. But you know what? That's a screwed up tax system. That's not the fault of you and I. That's the fault of a tax system set up by people like Warren Buffett and members of the government for themselves. But then they hear him talk about disingenuous and how rich people should pay a higher percentage. Well, perhaps you could just give the tax money. If you're so intent on paying higher taxes, instead of raising everyone else's taxes, why don't you take your money and donate it to the federal treasury? That's your option. You can do that any day of the year. You can donate your tax, your income to the federal government. They'll take it. Don't worry about it. You can feel good about yourself. But no, you want to take from other people because you've got your billions. And you're perfectly fine taking from other people. And that's just a problem. I don't like that. What did I miss here? Electric Kool-Aid acid test. Lone Wolf is funny tonight. Dr. Boy, what's my opinion on ethno-states or self-determination? Well, self-determination is a very tricky sort of thing. It's certainly something recognized by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's addressed in there. And it's also something the United Nations has addressed. And it's an international norm. But self-determination is a very dangerous game because how do you identify and at what level is it, you know? And the challenge with that is when you have like say let's just make up a totally fictitious thing, but let's say every Jew in the world wanted self-determination, and wherever they're at, they want to be part of the Jewish state. So we create a new Jewish state. We'll call it the Jewish state. Well, there's 9 million Jews in America. Do they get to cut away their land if they're here and make it, you know, disconnected from where the Jewish homeland is? I'm being a little bit silly with this, but self-determination is a very challenging thing to deal with. I know that the Suidlanders in South Africa are looking at this not from self-determination, but they're self-identifying as white South Africans as an ethnic group, and that itself is fraught with danger. White South Africans is not a homogenous group. It includes Afrikaners, and even some Afrikaners who don't consider themselves Afrikaners, but Boers, and includes white South Africans of English origin, of Irish origin, of Hungarian origin, of Russian origin, Jews, Portuguese, hundreds of thousands of ethnic Portuguese, many of whom their families fled from Angola, and a smaller number from Mozambique and settled in South Africa. So it's quite a diverse mix of those who consider themselves to be white South Africans. But it's a difficult thing. I don't want to spend today talking about that. We can do another one. Robin says Netscape was the first browser that incorporated JavaScript. Indeed it was. Indeed it was. Yep, JavaScript. Yep. Good show. We'll tune in again. So long. Thank you for all the fish. You're welcome, Lone Wolf. Okay, yeah, so 1 hour and 35 minutes, folks. I still got a good-sized audience here. I'm going to do one more round of questions if you want. Otherwise, we're going to cut it short because a few folks have dropped off. I don't mean to ban on everybody, but yeah, I've got some things I've got to take care of. And there was no launch. That's what the purpose of the stream was, is due to the launch. But Doxson's rule says Native American tribes are sovereign, yet the U.S. government has a lot of control over the land. Yes and no, Doxson's rule. The U.S. government has control over their foreign policy. It has control over national defense. But beyond that, there are limitations on what the federal government can do on Native American reservations. Now, that's an important distinction. So it's not quite the same, but think of it kind of like Botswana when it was Bechuanaland. It was a protectorate, and the British government guaranteed its national security and handled its foreign affairs, but it was governed largely internally. And so that's interesting. Oh, mail-in ballots. Oh, my gosh. I'm getting ready to do a video on mail-in ballots. You want to talk about a fraud? Woo, there you go. We just opened up a can of worms. Can of worms. Thank you, 1RB. Yes, mail-in ballots. Utter nonsense. Pure, unadulterated fraud. An effort to steal elections and to devalue the vote of citizens. That's what that's all about. Just a second. Wow, mail-in ballots. I was outside earlier and I was working on my lawn and I was getting hot under the collar. I thought the sun had come out, but it was simply my temperature increasing because I was so angry listening to Andrew Wilkow's show today, in which people were talking about mail-in ballots. This is the biggest scam being perpetuated. It is a mass fraud on the American experiment, on American democracy. Absolutely. Shameful, shameful, shameful conduct. Now, people say, wait a second, but you were in the military. Didn't you vote absentee? You're absolutely correct. I voted absentee every year from 1989 until this year. I've yet to vote this year because the primary, I'm actually a member of a registered party now. I wasn't a party member for 30 years, but I was going to be able to vote in the primary here this month, but it's been postponed to the summer because of the lockdown. So I have not voted in my home at my precinct since 1988. Every year I vote absentee ballot. I take a federal mail-in ballot application, I send it in, but of course when I registered to vote in that location, I had to provide identification to confirm who I was, and periodically I've also had to provide the identification through the mail-in ballot situation. And I vote absentee ballot as a legitimate overseas, normally overseas, but always away from my jurisdiction military member, because I can't change my state of residence. My residence was Ohio until now, even though I didn't live there because that's where I entered the military from. So I was eligible to vote in Ohio, and I did from 1983 all the way up until now. So having said that's very different than mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots are simply laziness to send ballots to places where people have addresses without confirming with identification who they are, or if they're even eligible to vote, whether even citizens or not. This is fraught with fraud. And this will be the greatest deception and swindle perpetuating American people since Obamagate. And that's what the effort is now, to defraud the American people. And this is a desire that has been perpetuated by the Democratic Party, among others. But many people, for many years, they've wanted to do this. And the argument kind of goes in line with, people are, there was this voter suppression. I get not a kick, but I just get annoyed when I hear that voter suppression. It is wrong to ask for identification to go to the ballot. Now, why is that? If you go to Walmart to collect your prescription medicine, you have to show photo identification in order to collect your meds. You can't just show and go, "Hi, I'm Dave Johnson. I'm here for my hydroxychloroquine and my Demerol. Thank you." Now, you have to provide a doctor's script from a physician, and you have to provide photo identification. Excuse me. Oh. So, if you can go to Walmart and get an ID card, why can't you provide it for a vote? The argument being perpetuated here is a tired old 19th century Jim Crow era nonsense. Excuse me. I think pollen's coming in the house. That is being used as an excuse to undermine the legitimacy of elections by letting people vote without producing identification. That's insane. Absolutely insane. And the argument is it's racist to ask for identification. Really? Is it racist to ask for identification to hand someone over dangerous drugs that are only given on prescription? No, it's not. Is it racist to ask for identification to cash a check or to withdraw money from a bank? No, it's not. It's also a requirement. So you should be required to provide identification to vote. And people should not be allowed to mail in a ballot unless they are physically unable to go to the ballot box, either because of employment elsewhere at the time, or because of illness, or bedridden because of a situation. Otherwise, you show up at the polls. And if you don't show up at the polls, then you don't care enough about the system. You can't be bothered. Now, the other argument is that, well, we should have mail-in ballots because people can't get away from work. It's a Tuesday. Then have the vote on a Saturday. Well, that'll offend Jews. Then have it on Sunday. That'll offend Christians. Well, then have it on Friday. That'll offend Muslims. Well, guess what? Somebody's going to be offended. That's probably why we do it on the first Tuesday, the general election of November, the first Tuesday. But that's what you have to do. You have to make it available to people. Or you could open a window for like 48 hours, but then you'd have to put a moratorium on news media reporting results. And that's not going to happen in the 21st century. Because if you had a 48-hour election, after 24 hours, the media would tell you who won and people wouldn't bother going voting. And that's a true story. It's bad enough as it is now. At 7 o'clock takes place in the presidential election, and Fox News and MSNBC are comfortable now reporting that with 0.27% of the vote in the state of Mississippi, Donald Trump will win the state. In Connecticut, Hillary Clinton, with less than 1,000% of the vote in, 23 votes have been counted in Connecticut, and we are predicting that Hillary Clinton will win Connecticut based on their modeling. And people are still voting around the country. It's absolutely insane. So you can't do the 48-hour thing. So I think that that the mail-in ballot is a great fraud on America and on democracy, and I will do a video on it. That's my plan. So I'm not sure how many South Africans are interested in that, but maybe a lot are, because some people are concerned that the 2021 municipal elections will not take place in South Africa now. I think it's a legitimate concern. Let's see. They don't even need to provide their ID. That's correct. Isn't that insane? Yep. Pay. If we vote online, the hackers will hack. Well, I'm a huge technology person. I've been playing with computers since high school with IBM data punch cards and Commodore business machines and PET with cassette tapes to load up the operating system, and then iOmega and their freaking big disk drives. And I've been with computers forever, and I'm every technological thing. I had the first MP3 player from Diamond Multimedia, the Rio, the very first one ever, which I had to wait 4 months because there was a lawsuit against the company about using it for MP3 recordings. I'm ahead of everything. I love technology, and I've always been an early adopter, kind of like George Jetson. But I have real issues with electronic voting because it's easily can be hacked, and you can't prove, and then it's invalid. There's no way to prove it. The only way to have legitimacy in an election is paper ballots, in which people have to physically be present to do it, or absentee ballots, which are paper, which you can track for people who are legitimate absentee voters. No, I'm all about paper, even in the 21st century. I'm not buying into this computer stuff. Anyone can make any result, anything you want. Someone can make me look like Barack Obama on this stream right now. They could hack into the stream, and they could make a real fake of me being Barack Obama. And who are you going to believe? Anyway, so yeah, I got real problems with that nonsense. Okay, so you got some stuff coming in here now. Why do South Africans vote on Wednesdays? That's a good question, General Inflatables. I have no idea why they vote on Wednesdays. If anybody knows, please share. Europe Rising, good to see you. Okay, well, what are you not tired, or Am I not tired of the multicultural agenda? Be more specific about that. Maybe you are below this because you got a lot of comments here. Racist is just a word used to shut down. Yeah, it is. Racism is a real thing, but not in the current political context, particularly in South Africa and the United States. Racism is just an insult, an invective hurled at somebody to shut down discourse because you don't want to hear what they have to say. So you call them a racist. Look at my... Are you Peter Afrikaans? Look at my video. Check it out. That's exactly what I'm saying without saying that, is that people are just using this as a way to cow opposition. So this gentleman, Peter Afrikaans, that made this video purportedly, he's being attacked for a racist video. But there's nothing racist in it. Maybe it's misogynist. It's certainly vulgar. Maybe it's unfair and a personal attack on Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, but it is not racist in any way whatsoever. The only racist part of it, one can conclude, is that the members of MK who happen to be black took offense that a supposed white man had made this vulgar comment against Dlamini-Zuma. Well, that's not racist. The only racist part about that is their inference that it's actually racist because it was a white person. So therefore, whatever criticism was leveled must make it racism. That's lunacy. That's insane. And that's the problem. It's just a word that people throw about. You hate the race cards, so you don't care about multiculturalism being pushed as an agenda. Huh? 1RB, listen to Wolf Blitzer and Van Jones at your own peril. Yeah. Do you not care if our European daughters become minorities in their own countries? That's right, Nicholas. Dan Workman. Oh, Dan, I didn't know you were here. And he was commenting. Honestly, just don't care about race. Really sorry if that offends anyone. It doesn't offend me. You're welcome to say what you like in the comments. Anybody is here, as long as they're not abusive. You remember computer punch cards, as do I, Doxson. Yeah. Nicholas, agree. Electronic anything is easy to manipulate. Just too easily, man. 90% of those pushing LGTB agenda, immigration, and anti-white stuff are usually Jewish or non-white. I don't know. I have no facts to back that up, Europe. I think you and Dan agree. Yeah. So, we got a little bit off track there. So, anyway, let's see. We're an hour and 45 minutes in here. And it looks like there's an interesting chat going on the side there, one I'm not going to engage in at the moment. But again, for those who tune in late, or if you're hoping to catch watching the Falcon X, the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket in space, we've missed that because weather has led to the mission being scrubbed today, the 27th of March, 2020, rescheduled for the 30th of March, in which you'll see NASA's joint combined space launch with SpaceX, the privately held corporation founded by Elon Musk, a South African multi-billionaire, founder of PayPal, later Tesla and SpaceX. Quite well known for these things, but SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket is successful and proven commercial rocket with the Dragon Crew Dragon capsule atop. It was supposed to launch astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley into space today to get to the International Space Station, a journey that would have taken them 19 hours to reach the space station and dock with it. And then they were supposed to successfully return to the Earth at a later date. That mission has been scrubbed for today owing to the poor weather at Cape Canaveral. It would have been the first manned space launch in the United States since 2011 when the space shuttle program was retired. Since then, the U.S. has sent astronauts into space, but we had to beg the Russians for slots on their launches based in Kazakhstan, and that's how we've been getting our astronauts in space for nearly a decade now. This would have been the historic first ever launch with a commercial public-private venture between SpaceX and NASA. Now, of course, many of the components and the parts of the space program for the Mercury and the Apollo programs and the shuttle were manufactured by private contractors, but the project was run by NASA, whereas these components and ship and launch were developed by SpaceX and is being brought in to provide a service for NASA. So this would have been historic, and we're looking forward to Behnken and Hurley getting into space perhaps in 3 days. So my apologies if you didn't see the launch. None of us did. The weather kind of scrubbed it, and I'm sure that we weren't the only ones disappointed because Donald Trump was present at Cape Canaveral for the launch, which didn't happen. Interesting to watch him walk off the plane carrying an umbrella. That was kind of a preview of what was to come. Nothing. No launch. So there you go. All right, so let's see. Bolshevism, Zuckerberg, anti-freedom speech. Oh, Dan's taking off. Well, Dan... no. Oh, okay. Doxson rules. No, Ranger buddy left. Sorry, I wasn't sure who left here. Okay, sorry. Hoorah. Sorry, no. Thanks for tuning in. 90% European American in the 50s. Now we're 60%. Not true. Europe rising. United States was 89% European in the early 1960s. Today we're over 70%. It's just a question of how you divide it and slice it up. But yes, but that is not because there are less European or white Americans. It's because many others have come in the country and populated it. So most immigrants are not Europeans coming in at this stage in our history. Well, I live stream a Saturday. Just a moment, I'll get to that, Rob. Yeah, so what has happened is here, the numbers of people coming in from abroad, courtesy of the Immigration Reform Act that took place the year that I was born, courtesy of Ted Kennedy, and setting quotas and creating the lottery system. The country has been inundated with immigrants from around the world, and it has had a dramatic impact on the cultural makeup of this country and the ethnicity of this country. But the European or white population of America is reproducing at a natural rate despite the fantasies and lies told by the media and by the government. Look at the actual facts. Natural rate of reproduction is still more than 2.1 children per couple. And so we are reproducing. It's just that other folks have come in at a very high rate and faster rate, and that has reduced the percentage of the population that are European origin, not reduce the actual numbers. The actual numbers of European Americans or white Americans has been increasing decade after decade. It's just that the number of others is increasing much faster as a consequence of unconstrained, illegal, and legal migration into America, much of which was done intentionally. However you feel about that, for it, against it, that's what's really been happening. So, will you live stream on Saturday, Robin? Yes, I will, Robin. I will be live streaming Saturday at 11 o'clock, and I've confirmed my guest, and I'll put that up here shortly because I've got his photo in his bio. My guest on Saturday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 5 o'clock in Gaborone in Johannesburg, will be Komi Klu, who's a Ghanaian-American economist, and he's a consultant based in Philadelphia. He and I were in Canada last year in Vancouver for a conference up there with the Canada-Africa Network in which we spoke about investing in Africa. And he's going to talk about debt, Africa and debt. We're going to talk about that on Saturday, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. in Gaborone and Johannesburg, and also that would be 4 p.m. in London or Abuja. So, no, that's false. Okay, fine. I can find my stats and back it up. I have the data if you're talking about what I just said. The best and brightest of whites are a huge minority. Werner Braun types are rare. White South African population is stagnated. Well, the reason the white population is stagnated in South Africa is because you've all left. Not you've all left, but the number of white South Africans who moved abroad is quite significant and has led to no increase in the natural birth rate as a consequence of so many people leaving. So white population in South Africa is treading water and has been small actual physical number increase, but it's a negligible number for the last 2 decades. And as a percentage of the population, it's declined because the rest of the population has continued to grow. For instance, coloreds continue to make up approximately the same amount of population they made up 30 years ago. Whites, smaller population, 13% down to below that, 9 or 8%, probably less than that actually. It's less than that. So as a percentage of population has declined. Indians have remained about the same number, but actual population has increased. The bell curve. I said I'm not counting dysgenic whites, I'm talking eugenics. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't have all the facts there. You a lot of comments there. Sorry about that, Europe Rising. So that's... so the mail-in ballots, that's fraud. Not a fan, not going to happen. Anyway, so folks, thanks for tuning in today. I really appreciate you joining the thread or the stream. I apologize for the launch. I'm as disappointed as many of you are that didn't happen, but we'll look forward on 3 days from now, and hopefully on the 30th, the launch will take place, and it still will be historic when it happens. And so the good news is that in the interest of abundance of caution, they've kept safety first and foremost, and so the launch didn't go forward. But that launch will be the NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, and hopefully on the 30th that'll take place. And there you have it. So it's been interesting to have folks tune in today. I really appreciate you coming in. Those who just joined the stream or came in late or are curious about what happens, what this channel is about if you're new to it, I'll describe it very quickly so people understand. So I'm Chris Wyatt, and this is my Indaba Africa channel. It's focused on geopolitics, national security, national strategy, and of course that covers the spectrum of things from science to economics to health sector to security, national defense, all those things. I'm a retired Army colonel with 36 years of service, served in the U.S. Army. My last assignment was the Director of African Studies at the U.S. Army War College, and now I run the Indaba Africa group. And so I got this YouTube channel. I've had it for a long time, but not really doing anything with it because I was a serving officer, and now I'm focusing on trying to build interest in Africa from people in North America, because I'm concerned that the United States will become second-rate economic power by the year 2050 if it continues to ignore Africa from an economic standpoint. Americans have the resources, the ingenuity, and the technology to make investments in Africa, and Africans can prosper from that, as can Americans. And so it's something I've just tried to focus on to get them there. My audience has grown by leaps and bounds with South Africans in particular, and I'm grateful for that, both South Africans in South Africa and from around the world. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I talk a fair amount about South Africa. But if you watch my channel, you'll see that I cover all of Africa, not just South Africa. And so my main means of coming to folks at this point is I do a regular weekly scheduled Saturday stream, a live stream, which I have a guest. This Saturday will be Komi Klu, a Ghanaian-American economist, and we'll be talking about debt in Africa, which is a topic that's apropos with the Wuhan coronavirus. And economies imploding, people needing money to feed their populations and just to keep companies in business. So we'll be talking about that on Saturday. That's a regular one. I also do these stray voltage, unscheduled live streams, or they might be scheduled just a few hours in advance to talk about an apropos political or economic topic of the day, or just to talk about whatever people want to talk about. And that's the stray voltage live stream, which is what this one was. And then I do prepared videos on a number of topics. And so I do a lot of those. For instance, I've done videos on the South African wine industry, on debunking expropriation without compensation, on debunking the myth of the U.S. military in Africa, and many other things, and debunking military bases in Africa. So I cover a lot of that stuff. I've lived all over the continent of Africa, and so I have a fair amount of experience for the past few decades having lived in Africa and worked there. And anyway, that's what the channel's about. So if you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe by pushing that subscribe button right down there. And right next to that, there's a little bell icon. You're going to want to toggle that and select notifications so that you get notified anytime I do a video, a live stream, or a prepared video. With my prepared videos, I normally do them as premieres, which means that it will play and there will be a chat window open. And I'll be there to answer questions and comment with folks. But I'm actually not broadcasting. It's kind of like turning on television for a regularly scheduled program. It's on at that hour. But it's playing. I'm not actually speaking on camera. It's a pre-recorded one. So that's a premiere. I do a lot of those on topics. And anyway, so for this video and these streams and those videos, feel free to leave your comments at the bottom of the comment section. I read them all, even the ones that are negative. I'm happy to read those. If you disagree with something I said, please put it out there. If you agree, that's fine too. Put it out there. And finally, I ask that you toggle that like button down there as well. Likes drive viewership, and I've really noticed it with the rapid growth of my channel, the number of subscribers and loyal subscribers who follow the channel, is that the more likes you get as a percentage of those who view the video, the more likely is that YouTube will push your video up and promote it for people who have a similar interest. So if I'm talking about South Africa and there's people interested in it, automatically the algorithm will find things related to South Africa that viewer is interested in and list it and go, here's some videos to watch. If there's no likes on a video, it's not going to wind up there. But the more likes you get, the more likely it is to show up there. So I thank you all for that. There's some more comments coming in before I close out here. Let me see. Robin says, thanks. Let's stay positive. Yeah, that's what today was all about, the launch. That didn't happen, but I think we had pretty positive. Dan, have a good evening. Same to you. Best and brightest, multiculturalism, agenda, the global Zionists. We need biodiversity. We certainly need biodiversity. And one RB, hey Chris, did Morning Joe knock up his intern? This will become interesting. Yeah, that's Trump is trolling Joe Scarborough. We'll see what happened there. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I really thank you all for tuning in. I hope that you've enjoyed the stream. I've enjoyed this 2 hours. Go back out, get some exercise, maybe do a bit of lawn work, and wrap up for the evening. But thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for more videos from me. Feel free to check out today's videos, one of which was, Are You Peter Afrikaans? And the other was related to Libya and Russian jets arriving in the country. Anyway, so thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Bite your ankles. I didn't see any comments from you other than thank you for a great show. Well, you're most welcome. Thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to smash that like button. Everyone have a pleasant evening. And once again, the launch of the Demo 2 mission has been postponed today owing to Mother Nature and weather in Florida at Cape Canaveral, thunderstorms and clouds making it impossible for the I keep saying shuttle, I want to say shuttle, so accustomed to saying space shuttle, for the Falcon 9 rocket to launch from the pad. So that has been rescheduled for the 30th of May. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hope we can see that on the 30th. Thank you. Oh, Ice, you're there too. Wow, okay. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. You all have a pleasant evening. God bless, and hang in there. It's